Orphan boy heard screams behind a motel wall and pulled the fire alarm. Minutes later, 200 bikes boxed the motel, and the scream was so close it rattled the paint. Eli Carter froze in the back hallway of the Blue Heron Motel with a trash bag in one hand and a half-dead flashlight in the other. It wasn't a TV, and it wasn't a drunk couple. It was pure panic, cutting, ragged, and right on the other side of the wall. Before we continue, tell us in the comments where you are watching this from, because the next few minutes at this little roadside motel changed everything. Eli had been outside, sweeping the lot for Mr. Danner when the dumpster filled up. "Use the back hall," Danner had snapped, like Eli was the inconvenience, not the overflowing trash. Eli did what he always did, kept his head down, and stayed useful. Cash under the table, leftovers when Rhonda felt generous, and a place to curl up at night in the storage shed behind the ice machine when the wind got mean. He dragged the bag along the tile, flashlight beam wobbling over stained wallpaper and identical doors. That's when the first scream hit. It came from the left, where the hallway narrowed into the dead-end service passage. Room 17 sat on the other side of the wall, one of the weekly rooms, curtains always shut, the kind Danner rented to people who didn't want to show ID. Eli stopped. The motel had its usual noises, soda machine hum, distant TV, the buzz of the exit sign. Under that, someone breathed too fast. Then the scream came again, muffled, like a hand had clamped over a mouth. A heavy thud followed, and the picture frame above the door rattled. Eli stepped back and stared at the door. 17. The number plate was crooked. A Do Not Disturb sign hung sideways on the knob, creased like it had been crushed. He knocked once. Nothing. He knocked harder. "Hey, are you okay in there?" Silence. And then a tiny whimper that leaked through the seam where the door met the frame. Eli reached for the handle. Locked. He tried again, twisting hard enough to sting his wrist. Still locked. Around the peephole, something dark was smeared, like a thumb dragged across metal. He leaned closer, eyes scanning the frame the way Danner had taught him to check for damage after rowdy guests. The latch plate had fresh scratches, shiny against the old metal, like something had been wedged in and yanked out recently. And the air coming from under the door carried a sharp chemical bite. Cleaner, bleach, something meant to erase. Eli should have walked away. The Blue Heron wasn't a place you got involved. People came here to hide from bills, from spouses, from the law, from themselves. And Eli, an orphan kid nobody had signed for, was the easiest person to blame when anything went wrong. But the sound behind that wall wasn't a secret. It was a warning. He ran for the front office, past the vending machines and the weak fluorescent lights that made everything look sickly. The highway hissed outside, tires passing like distant rain. Rhonda sat behind the desk scrolling, keys and radio beside her. "Rhonda," Eli said, breathless. "Room 17. Someone's screaming." She barely lifted her eyes. "People scream in motels." "It's not that," Eli said. "It's someone's getting hurt." Rhonda's mouth tightened. "Eli, you're not supposed to be inside." "Please," he said, "just come listen." Rhonda started to wave him off, until a dull thud echoed down the corridor. Even from here it sounded wrong. She stood, snatched the master keys. "Fine. If Danner asks, you were never in the building." They moved fast. The closer they got to 17, the heavier the air felt, like the motel was holding its breath. Rhonda knocked. "Front desk." No answer. She knocked again, harder. "Sir, everything okay in there?" A single choked whimper answered, thin, desperate. Rhonda swallowed, slid the key into the lock. The key turned. The bolt clicked. But the door didn't open. Something on the other side held it shut. Rhonda pushed with her shoulder. The door gave a fraction, then slammed back, braced by something heavy. Eli's pulse spiked. "Someone's blocking it." Rhonda leaned close to the wood. "Open up right now or I'm calling the cops." A voice answered immediately, low and steady, right behind the door. "Go away." Rhonda blinked, thrown off by how calm it was. "Sir, there's a fire alarm," she said, forcing official into her voice. "You have to open the door." "We're fine," the voice replied. "Leave." Eli's mouth went dry. That voice didn't match the screams. Then the wall beside the door took a hit, pounding from inside the drywall, not the door itself. 1, 2, 3. Then a dragged scrape, like someone slid down and tried to stay upright. Rhonda stumbled back. "Oh my God!" She grabbed her radio. "I'm calling Danner." Eli's brain ran ahead of her words. Danner would take forever, and when he arrived, he'd care about one thing: whether a paying guest complained. Eli didn't wait. Near the vending machines, a red box hung under a sign that read, "Fire alarm. Pull down." Eli grabbed it with both hands and yanked. The alarm exploded into a shrill mechanical howl. Lights above the doors flashed. Another siren answered somewhere deeper in the building, turning the whole motel into one screaming throat. Rhonda spun on him. "Eli, what did you—" "Now everyone has to come out," he said. "Now nobody can pretend they didn't hear." Doors flew open up and down the hall. Guests stumbled out, swearing, filming, demanding answers. One man tried to squeeze past Rhonda toward his room again, muttering about his wallet until Rhonda shoved him back toward the exit. A couple from the far end argued about whether to grab their luggage. Someone kept yelling, "Where's the smoke?" like the absence of smoke proved the world was safe. Eli stayed planted near room 17, eyes locked on the door. It didn't open, not even a crack. A woman from room 16 poked her head out, saw the sealed door beside her, then snapped her head back in and locked herself inside as if the alarm was contagious. Danner arrived like a storm. A minute later, Mr. Danner charged into the hallway in a fury, hair smashed from sleep, face already red. He shoved through guests without apologizing, scanning for the person who'd cost him money. "Who pulled it?" he yelled over the siren. Rhonda pointed at Eli. "He did! He says 17! There's someone in there!" Danner seized Eli by the collar and yanked him close. "You think you get to do this in my building?" he snarled. "You want cops here? You want them asking questions?" Eli tried to speak, but the siren drowned him out. He jabbed a finger toward 17, toward the wall that had pounded like a heart. Danner followed the gesture, annoyance shifting into calculation. He stepped to the door and knocked hard. "Sir," he barked, "open up! Fire alarm!" The calm voice answered again, almost polite. "False alarm." "No such thing," Danner snapped, then forced his tone smoother as guests watched. "Open the door so we can clear it." No movement, no latch, nothing. Danner pushed with his shoulder the way Rhonda had. The door gave the tiniest amount and slammed back again, held by something heavy. Rhonda stared at him. "It's blocked," she mouthed. Danner shot her a look that said, "Shut up." Behind them, guests jammed toward the exit. Someone recorded Danner's face and laughed. Danner turned and shouted, "Everybody outside!" like it was his idea, like he was in control. He pointed at Rhonda. "Go reset the panel. Call it in as a malfunction." Rhonda hesitated. "We can't just—" "Do it," Danner hissed. Another hard thud hit the wall beside 17. Something wet slid inside the drywall. Eli twisted free and dropped into a crouch before Danner could grab him again. At the baseboard, where wall met carpet, a dark line was seeping out, too thick to be water. It crawled along the edge like it wanted to stay hidden. The smell hit him, bleach, sharp and clean, trying to erase something coppery underneath. Eli lifted his eyes. Under the buzzing hallway light he could see it, a hairline seam in the paint, a rectangle that didn't belong, as if a panel had been cut into the wall and hurriedly covered. Two tiny screw heads were half buried under paint. Fresh paint, still slightly glossy compared to the dull, aged wall around it. "That's not normal," Eli said, looking up at Rhonda. Rhonda stared where he pointed, her face draining. Danner saw it too. For a fraction of a second, something flickered across his expression. Then, anger snapped back into place. He grabbed Eli again, harder. "Outside," he hissed, "right now." Eli tried to point again, but Danner's grip was iron. Guests surged past them toward the exits. Rhonda kept shouting instructions, but her eyes kept darting back to room 17, like she was afraid of what might come through. Danner dragged Eli through the doors into the parking lot, where cold air punched his lungs and the siren screamed out into the night. Eli stumbled, caught himself, and twisted back toward the building. Through the glass, he could still see the corridor, the closed door of room 17, the rectangle in the wall like a scar. And then, faint but unmistakable, the wall beside room 17 knocked back, once, like something inside had heard him and was answering. Not a thud, a signal. Eli felt it in his teeth. The parking lot looked like a shaken beehive. Guests spilled out in pajamas, hoodies, bare feet slapping cold asphalt. A guy in a stained tank top stood by his pickup recording the flashing lights through the lobby windows, narrating like he'd just found free entertainment. Someone's dog barked non-stop from inside a car. The fire alarm scream bounced off the soda machine in the vending area and poured out into the night, making every face tighter, every movement sharper. Mister. Danner kept Eli pinned by the collar near the office door, as if the kid was contraband he needed to hide. "You just cost me a week's rent on 3 rooms," he said through clenched teeth. "You know what happens when people think cops are coming? They leave. They don't pay. They don't come back." Eli's throat hurt from the siren and the cold. He tried to pull away, but Danner's knuckles were white in Eli's hoodie. "Someone's in there," Eli shouted. 17. I heard her. Rhonda heard her. Rhonda stood a few steps behind, radio in her hand, looking like she wanted to be anywhere else. Her eyes kept darting to the hallway behind the glass, toward the corridor that led to room 17. Danner's grip tightened. "You're going to stop saying that. Do you understand me?" Eli could taste the bleach smell still clinging to his nose, could see that dark line creeping from the baseboard in his head like it had burned itself onto the inside of his eyelids. "I saw blood," he said, lower now, trying to push the words into Danner's ear like a secret you couldn't ignore. "There's a panel cut into the wall. There's something behind." Danner's face jerked closer. "You saw nothing." Then he shook Eli once, hard enough to snap Eli's teeth together. The world clicked into a different gear, not just anger, fear. The kind that doesn't care who gets hurt as long as the problem disappears. "You're done here," Danner said. "You hear me? You're gone. Tonight." Eli stared at him. Gone meant the highway shoulder and the trees beyond the lot, meant a night under damp leaves and a morning with no money and no way to eat. He'd been gone before. The county didn't come looking for kids like him. "You can't," Eli said. "I work here." Danner laughed once, short and ugly. "You sweep here. That's not work. That's me being generous." Rhonda opened her mouth like she wanted to argue, but Danner's eyes cut to her and she stopped. She wasn't cruel. She just wasn't brave. The siren kept screaming. In the distance, down the highway, red and white lights appeared. Slow at first, then closer, then bright enough to paint the motel sign and the hoods of cars with flickering color. Fire truck. Maybe a volunteer crew from the next town. A sheriff's unit behind it, because in places like this they didn't roll to anything alone. Danner saw them and his entire posture shifted. The performance clicked on, shoulders back, jaw unclenched. A man who was in charge, who handled things, who had nothing to hide. He released Eli so suddenly Eli stumbled. Rhonda moved toward the front desk door. "I need to reset the panel." "Do it," Danner said, still loud enough for guests to hear. "It's a malfunction. We'll get it fixed. Everybody keep calm." A woman shouted, "My baby's still inside." Danner spread his hands like a politician. "Ma'am, no smoke, no fire. We just need everyone outside until the fire department clears the building. That's the rule." The woman clutched her phone and sobbed into it anyway. Eli stayed near the glass, trying to see into the corridor. Through the lobby window he caught a glimpse of the hallway light, and, far down it, the corner where room 17 would be. He couldn't see the door from this angle. He could only see that the hallway was empty, like it was holding its breath too. The fire truck pulled into the lot and stopped at an angle that blocked half the entrance. 2 volunteers climbed out in heavy jackets, moving with that practiced calm that said they'd done this 100 times, and the danger was usually nothing. A sheriff's deputy stepped out of the cruiser behind them, one hand already on his belt. He scanned faces the way men like him always did, looking for the one person who didn't belong. His eyes landed on Eli. Danner met him halfway with a forced smile. "False alarm," he said before the deputy even spoke. "Kids. You know how it is." The deputy's gaze didn't leave Eli. "What kid?" Danner glanced back like he'd forgotten Eli existed. "That one. The help." "I'm not," Eli started, but the deputy cut him off with a look. "How old are you?" the deputy asked. Eli hesitated. Saying 14 usually made adults decide he couldn't be right about anything. Saying anything else made them decide he was lying. 14, he said. "Where are your parents?" Eli felt something hard shift in his chest. "I don't have any." The deputy's expression didn't soften. If anything, it went flatter. "So you're staying here? How?" Danner slid in smoothly. "He's not staying here," he said, smiling wider. "He helps out. I let him hang around, keeps him out of trouble." Eli's hands balled into fists. "I heard screaming," he said, louder, forcing the words past the siren. "From behind a wall. Room 17. Someone was hitting the wall. There was blood." Danner's hand landed on Eli's shoulder like a clamp. "He's got an imagination," Danner told the deputy. "Real sad story. Foster system. Acts out for attention." Rhonda stood in the office doorway, the alarm panel open behind her, fingers shaking. She looked between Eli and the deputy like she wanted to help, but couldn't find a safe way to do it. The deputy finally looked at Danner. "If it's a false alarm, why didn't you reset it?" "Panel's old," Danner said quickly. "Rhonda's doing it now. We evacuated like we're supposed to." One of the firefighters stepped closer. "We still got to do a sweep," he said. "Policy." "Of course," Danner said. "I'll take you. We've got a couple long-term guests, might be asleep. I'll knock." The firefighter nodded, already turning toward the lobby. Eli stepped forward, desperate. "Please," he said to the firefighter, "it's not—" Danner's fingers dug into Eli's shoulder harder, not enough to be seen as assault, enough to send a message through bone. The firefighter glanced down at Eli, then back to Danner. The decision happened in half a second. In the end, the firefighter had a building to clear and a manager who seemed calm. A kid without parents wasn't going to outrank that. "Stay outside," the firefighter told Eli, not unkindly, just final. "We'll check it." Danner steered the firefighters into the lobby like he was guiding them on a tour. Eli didn't stay outside. He moved along the edge of the crowd, keeping low, slipping behind a minivan where nobody could grab him without making a scene. He watched the lobby door, watched the firefighter disappear down the hall with Danner leading. Then he saw someone else. A man stepped out from the shadow of the side walkway near the laundry room entrance that regular guests never used. He wore a dark jacket and a cap pulled low. In one hand, he carried a small tool bag, the kind maintenance guys used, and clipped to his belt was a plastic card with a black magnetic strip. A key card. The man didn't look at the crowd. He looked at the building like he was counting doors, like he was measuring time. Eli's skin prickled. The man's posture was too calm for a fire alarm, too deliberate. The man turned his head slightly and met Eli's eyes through the chaos, through the flashing lights. Not a full stare. Just enough to let Eli know he'd been seen. Eli's stomach dropped. The man walked to the side entrance, tapped his keycard, and slipped inside without speaking to anyone. Eli tried to move toward the door, but a guest bumped him, complaining loudly about stupid alarms. And when Eli shoved past, Danner's voice roared from somewhere near the lobby. "Eli, get over here!" Eli stopped. If he ran inside now, Danner would chase him. The deputy might grab him. He'd be the problem again. He'd be the one they removed so the adults could go back to pretending. Inside the lobby, the fire alarm abruptly cut off. The sudden silence was so sharp, it made Eli's ears ring anyway. Rhonda had reset it, or someone else had. For a moment, there was nothing but the highway hiss and the murmurs of irritated guests. Then, the fire captain came back out with Danner. "We're clear," the captain announced to the crowd. "No smoke, no fire. You can go back inside." People groaned and shuffled toward their rooms, still filming, still muttering. The deputy lingered, watching the crowd thin, his eyes catching on Eli again like a hook. Danner stepped close to Eli, his smile gone now that the show was over. "I'm done with you," he said quietly. "You hear me? You made me look stupid in front of the county." "I didn't make you," Eli started. Danner leaned in. "You've got 10 minutes to grab whatever junk you keep in my shed and get off my property." Eli's throat tightened. "You're just gonna let her stay in there?" Danner's eyes flicked toward the building. Just a flick, like he didn't want to look too hard at that part of his own motel. "There is no her," Danner said. "There's nothing. And if you say another word to that deputy, I'll tell him you broke into rooms. I'll tell him you stole. You think he'll believe you over me?" Eli glanced at the deputy. The man was laughing at something one of the firefighters said. Relaxed now, the crisis over. Eli knew exactly who he would believe. Eli swallowed. "Rhonda heard it," he said. Rhonda was already gone, slipping back inside, eyes down, moving like if she hurried enough she could outrun what she knew. Danner's voice dropped even lower. "You want to be a hero? Heroes get hurt. You want to eat? You keep your head down." As Danner turned away, Eli saw the man with the keycard again. He was coming out of the side entrance now, tool bag in hand, walking like he'd just finished fixing something minor. He moved past the returning guests without being noticed, past the firefighter rolling hose, past the deputy who didn't even glance his way. The man's gaze slid to Eli one more time. This time he gave the smallest nod, like a polite acknowledgement between strangers. And then he spoke, barely loud enough for Eli to hear. "You shouldn't pull alarms," the man said. The words weren't shouted. They weren't even angry. They were certain. Eli stood frozen as the man walked away around the corner of the building, out of sight. Eli waited for another scream. None came. And somehow, that was worse. Eli walked behind the ice machine with his jaw locked so tight his teeth ached. The motel had gone back to normal fast, too fast, doors shut. TVS turned back on. People returned to their rooms like the alarm had been a commercial break. The fire truck pulled out, the deputy rolled away, and the blue heron swallowed the whole thing the way it swallowed everything else. Quietly, without paperwork. Mr. Danner didn't even watch Eli leave. He stood by the office smoking, talking to a guest like nothing had happened, like the kid he'd just thrown out didn't exist. Eli cut around the side, past the laundry door and the maintenance closet, keeping his face down. The shed where he slept was tucked behind the ice machine, half hidden by a dead patch of hedges and old beer cases. The lock was a joke. Danner liked it that way, enough to make Eli feel like he had a place, not enough to make it truly his. Eli opened the door, and the smell of damp cardboard hit him. His things were exactly what you'd expect an orphan kid to own. A frayed blanket, a busted backpack, 2 shirts, a cracked phone that only worked on Wi-Fi, and a jar of peanut butter he guarded like money. He shoved everything into the backpack fast, hands shaking. 10 minutes, Danner had said. Eli didn't have 10 minutes. He had whatever time it took before the man with the keycard decided Eli was a problem that needed to stop breathing. He stepped back out and closed the shed door quietly. Then he didn't go to the highway. He turned and stared at the motel. Room 17 was on the 2nd floor, same side as the laundry. If the firefighters had been clear, it meant they hadn't opened that room. Or they had, and somebody made sure what they saw stayed inside their own heads. Either way, Eli couldn't let it end with false alarm and a threat. He moved along the fence line where the lot lights didn't reach, hugging shadows, slipping behind a row of parked cars. A couple laughed somewhere near the vending machines. A TV blared behind thin curtains. Everything sounded normal. Eli hated how normal it sounded. He reached the side of the building where the laundry entrance was. The door was for staff only, the kind guests didn't notice because they didn't want to notice. Eli had used it 100 times carrying dirty sheets. Tonight, the handle didn't budge. Keycard lock. Eli's stomach tightened. He leaned in close. The plastic housing had a fresh scuff, like someone had recently replaced it or tightened it. The motel didn't fix things unless they were forced. Danner had paid for this, recently. Eli backed away and circled toward the rear stairwell. The stairwell door was usually propped with a rock because the latch stuck. Tonight, the rock was gone. He tried the door anyway. Locked. Eli swallowed and kept moving, staying low, eyes scanning for cameras. The Blue Heron didn't have cameras. Danner always said they were too expensive. Eli had believed him because he wanted to. Now he understood. Cameras would have recorded the wrong things. At the back corner of the building, a narrow strip of dirt ran between the motel wall and a chain-link fence. Eli squeezed into it, shoulder-scraping brick, and followed it to a warped maintenance window half hidden by bushes. It was one of those small basement windows near ground level, meant for crawl spaces and pipes. Eli had looked through it once during a storm and seen nothing but darkness and insulation. He knelt and wiped grime off the glass. The window was open a crack, not from rot, from intent. Eli held his breath and listened. No footsteps, no voices. Only the highway in the distance and the gentle thrum of the motel's central AC unit. He slid his fingers under the window frame and pulled. The pane lifted with a soft rasp. Eli stared at the gap like it was a mouth. He shoved his backpack through first, then wriggled his shoulders, ribs scraping. The smell inside was old dust and damp wood, with a faint chemical edge that didn't belong in a crawl space. Bleach again. Stronger down here. Eli dropped into darkness and landed on hard-packed dirt and stray gravel. The air was colder under the building, dense and stale. He clicked his flashlight on. The beam caught low beams and pipes, cords stapled to joists, spiderwebs trembling in the light. The crawlspace ran in a long rectangle under the first floor. Eli moved slowly, keeping his body low, trying not to stir dust that would make him cough. Above him, footsteps crossed a room. Not heavy, not running, controlled. Eli froze, light off. The steps stopped. Eli held his breath until his lungs burned. Then the steps continued, fading away. He flicked the light back on and crawled toward where he thought room 17 would be. The walls above were labeled in his head like a map. Office, vending area, storage, hallway. Room 17's wall would be here, near the corridor that dead-ended into service access. He reached a section where the joists looked newer. Fresh lumber among old. Someone had reinforced the floor, or cut into it and repaired. Eli angled the flashlight upward. A rectangle of plywood sat between beams, screws clean and bright compared to everything else. Not old screws. New. His pulse jumped. He dragged closer and ran a finger along the plywood seam. It was too perfect, too recent. Whoever did this hadn't done it quietly for long-term maintenance. They'd done it fast, like patching a wound. Eli fished the cracked phone from his pocket and snapped a picture with the flashlight beam. The screen lagged, then captured it. Fresh screws, fresh plywood, fresh lies. Above him, a muffled sound, not footsteps. A soft, strangled gasp. Eli's stomach flipped. It came from somewhere ahead, higher, closer to the wall line. He killed the light again and crawled forward using touch, fingertips feeling along dirt and pipe brackets. He reached a spot where the crawlspace narrowed and the air smelled wrong, sweet and chemical and human, the kind of smell that had nowhere to go. He switched the flashlight on low. There, on a pipe wrap, was a smear of dark red. Not rust, too thick, too recent. Eli stared at it until his vision narrowed. Then, above him, the wall knocked once, very faint like a knuckle tap through wood. Eli's throat tightened. That was the signal from earlier, the one he'd felt in his teeth. He shifted, aiming the beam up the wall line. A vent opening sat between studs, an access point for wiring. The metal grate was screwed in, but the screws were uneven, one slightly stripped. Someone had opened it. Eli crawled under it and listened. On the other side, a thin sound, like fabric rubbing against drywall. A shaky inhale. A person. Eli reached up and tested the screws with his fingers. Too tight. He didn't have a screwdriver. He dug in his backpack, frantic and silent, fingers hitting his peanut butter jar, his blanket, then the small multi-tool he used to cut twine and open stubborn boxes. The blade was dull, but it had a flat edge. Eli wedged it under the screw head and twisted. The metal squealed softly. Eli froze, listening. No answer above. No footsteps. He twisted again. The screw turned a fraction. Another twist. Another. The grate loosened. Eli pulled it down carefully, holding it so it wouldn't clatter. A small rectangular hole opened into darkness above. The smell hit him immediately. Bleach trying to cover sweat and something worse. "Hey," Eli whispered into the opening, voice barely a thread. "Can you hear me?" A pause, then a tiny sound, like someone trying to answer but afraid. A breath caught in a throat. Eli swallowed hard. "I'm going to get you out. Don't make noise." A faint whisper came through, barely audible. "Please." Eli's eyes stung. He forced himself to stay steady. "Where are you? Are you in the wall?" Another pause. Then, They put me." A sound cut her off. Footsteps above, close. Eli's blood went cold. Not in a room, in the hallway, and moving toward this wall. Eli snapped the grate back into place as softly as he could, pressing it up with trembling hands. He forced the screw into a half-turn just to hold it, then killed the flashlight and flattened himself against the dirt. The footsteps stopped directly overhead. A keycard beep sounded, faint, muffled, but unmistakable. A door opened. Someone entered the dead-end corridor. Eli lay frozen, listening to the silence above shift. A subtle scrape. The kind made by a knee bending, a person crouching. Then another sound, metal on metal, like a screwdriver touching a screw. Eli's lungs screamed for air. He took the smallest breath possible. A voice spoke above him, low and calm. "Come on," the man murmured. "You're not supposed to be talking." Eli's fingernails dug into dirt. There was a soft, strangled noise, someone stifling a sob. Eli's body reacted before his brain could stop it. He rolled toward the nearest pipe support, searching in the dark for anything he could use as a weapon, a lever, a tool. His fingers brushed something hard, a loose piece of metal conduit, half detached. He wrapped his hand around it, and a beam of light stabbed down through a gap in the floorboard seam just ahead, cutting the crawlspace darkness like a knife. Eli froze. Above him, the man's voice shifted, no longer casual. "I know you're down there," he said. Eli didn't move. The light shifted, scanning. The beam slid over pipes, dirt, cobwebs, then paused inches from Eli's knee. Eli tightened his grip on the conduit. The man chuckled softly, like he wasn't angry, like he was amused by the idea of a kid trying to hide in the foundations of a motel. "Don't make this hard," the man said. And the floor above Eli creaked with slow, deliberate weight, like someone was stepping onto the exact spot where the plywood patch and the new screws sat, right over the hidden seam. The light stopped on Eli's knee like it had weight. He held his breath so hard his ribs shook. Above him, the man shifted his stance slowly, letting the old floorboards creak on purpose. Eli could picture him without seeing him, cap low, tool bag on the ground, calm hands working a screwdriver like he was tightening a cabinet hinge, not sealing a person into a wall. "I know you're down there," the man said again, softer now. Not a threat, a decision. Eli's fingers tightened on the loose conduit until the metal bit his palm. If you're watching this and you've ever had that moment where your brain starts listing exits like a machine, drop where you are in the comments. Because Eli had two choices, and both were bad. The flashlight beam drifted away, searching the crawl space. Eli forced himself to stay perfectly still, waiting for the second the light wasn't on him, waiting for the moment the man got confident. The beam slid across pipes, across dust, across the plywood patch with those bright new screws. It paused there. Eli felt the man above him lean down, and the air changed, like a mouth close to a keyhole. Then the screwdriver bit into wood. One of the new screws started to turn. Eli's pulse exploded. If the man pulled that patch, he could open the crawl space from above and drop down with the light right in Eli's face. And worse, he'd have access to the vent Eli had opened, the one where the girl had whispered please into the dark. Eli moved, fast and silent, the way kids learn to move when adults can't know you exist. He slid backward on his elbows, pushing with his heels, keeping his body flat. The conduit dragged against dirt. The tiniest scrape sounded like thunder in his own head. The screwdriver stopped. Eli froze again. A beat. Then, above him, the man chuckled, like Eli's fear was predictable. "You can crawl," he said. "That won't help." The beam of light stabbed down again, quicker now, more aggressive. It swept in a tight arc, hunting. Eli didn't wait for it to find him. He snapped the conduit upward and slammed it into the nearest pipe support as hard as he could. Metal rang through the crawl space. A pipe shuddered. Dust fell like rain. Above him, the man cursed under his breath. First real emotion Eli had heard. Eli used that half second. He twisted and shot backward, pushing into the darker section where the foundation dipped lower. He kept the flashlight off, moving by feel, palms finding dirt, forearms scraping rock. The light above him swung wild, searching for the source of the noise. Eli crawled like something was attached to his ankles. A hand slammed on the floorboards overhead, a heavy thump that made the dirt jump. "Stop!" the man barked, voice sharper now. "Stop right now!" Eli didn't. The crawl space narrowed, pipes lowering. Eli squeezed under a beam, shoulder catching, hoodie snagging on a nail. He bit his lip hard enough to taste blood so he wouldn't grunt. Behind him, something shifted. A hollow knock, like a panel being yanked open, then the sound of a body hitting dirt. The man had come down. Eli's blood turned to ice. He didn't look back. He couldn't afford to look back. He kept crawling, angling toward the maintenance window he'd entered through, but the crawl space had turns he'd never explored. Old motels were built like secrets, little dead ends, little shortcuts, little places to stash things nobody was supposed to see. A flashlight snapped on behind him, brighter now, closer. The beam bounced off pipes and turned the dust into glitter. "Eli!" the man called, and hearing his name down here made Eli's stomach drop through the ground. "You don't want this. You don't even know what you stepped into." Eli crawled harder. The beam swept and caught the back of his shoe. Eli kicked, sending gravel into the air, then rolled behind a concrete footing. The light hit the footing and washed it white. The man's boots crunched closer, slow and patient. Eli felt for anything, another loose pipe, a tool, a rock. His fingers found a rusted metal bracket half buried in dirt. He ripped it free, ignoring the sting as it tore skin. The boot stopped. The beam lowered, careful now. Eli held the bracket like a knife. The man's voice came from just beyond the footing. "You're a kid," he said. "I don't want to do anything ugly." Eli's jaw trembled, but he forced out, "There's someone in the wall." A pause, then, almost kindly, "No, there isn't." Eli gripped the bracket harder. "I heard her." The beam slid around the footing, searching for Eli's face. Eli lunged. He swung the bracket at the flashlight, not the man. Metal smashed plastic. The beam exploded into darkness. The man made a noise, half surprise, half anger, and grabbed for Eli. Eli ducked under the reaching arm and shoved past him, shoulders slamming into the man's ribs. The man stumbled against a pipe and swore, louder now. Eli didn't stop. He crawled blind, lungs burning, hands slipping in dust. Behind him, the man's flashlight flickered back on. He'd switched to another light, smaller, harsher. Eli saw something ahead, a square of faint gray. Not light, space, an access hatch. He scrambled to it, fingers finding the edges. It was one of those cheap plywood doors that led up into a closet or a utility nook. Eli jammed his shoulder under it and pushed. It didn't move. Locked from above, he kicked it once, again. Above him, the man laughed once, short and vicious. "Wrong way." Eli's throat closed. He spun, crawling away from the hatch just as the man surged forward, faster now that the chase had narrowed. Eli's hand hit cold metal, a pipe junction with a valve wheel. Eli didn't think. He grabbed the wheel and yanked. The valve resisted, then gave. A hiss burst out. The smell was sharp and wet. Water surged through the line, pressure shifting. Above them, somewhere in the motel, a pipe knocked and groaned like an animal waking up. Eli kept turning the valve until it fought him, then he tore his hands away and ran, crawling hard, toward the maintenance window. Behind him, the man shouted, "Idiot!" Water started to spit from a coupling down the line, spraying into the dirt. It wasn't a flood yet, but it was noise. It was distraction. It was something that would force a maintenance man to explain why the building's plumbing was suddenly screaming. Eli found the window by touch. He shoved his backpack through first, then jammed his shoulders up and out, ribs scraping, breath tearing. Cold night air hit his face like a slap. He rolled into the bushes and lay still, listening. From inside the crawl space, the man's voice rose, controlled but furious. "Eli!" Eli crawled backward through the bushes, staying low until the motel wall blocked the window from view. Only then did he stand and run. He didn't run toward the highway. He ran along the back of the building, past the line of rooms, keeping to the darkest strip where the lot lights didn't reach. A door opened somewhere on the second floor. A male voice snapped, "What the hell, my sink? Water." The valve had done something. Good. Eli cut toward the laundry entrance because it was the only place he could disappear into the building again without crossing the open lot where Danner might see him. The keycard lock was there, but so was the old delivery door beside it, the one with the warped frame. He tried it. It opened. Eli slipped inside and pulled it shut without a click, standing in a narrow service corridor that smelled like detergent and hot dust. The fluorescent light overhead flickered like it wanted to die. Washing machines rumbled behind a door, the motel's guts. He moved fast, barefoot quiet in his worn sneakers, following the hallway toward the main corridor that led to room 17. He had to get back. He had to mark the exact spot. He had to do something before that man sealed the girl deeper, moved her, erased her. Eli rounded the corner and stopped so hard his breath caught. Mr. Danner stood in the corridor near the linen cart, talking to someone. Not Rhonda. The man with the key card, cap still low, tool bag now slung over his shoulder. Face calm again, like the crawl space hadn't happened, like he hadn't just dropped into dirt to hunt a kid. Danner's voice was tight. "You said it was handled." It is, the man replied. It's always handled. Danner glanced toward the hallway Eli had come from, and Eli felt his whole body go cold. If Danner saw him here, it was over. If the man saw him, worse. Eli ducked back into the laundry room, pressed into the shadow between two industrial dryers. Heat rolled off the machines, damp and heavy. His heart hammered so hard, he thought the metal panels would vibrate and give him away. Through the cracked door, he heard Danner. The kid pulled the alarm. Sheriff was here. The man's tone didn't change. Kids do stupid things. This kid does more than stupid, Danner snapped. He listens. He watches. A pause. Then, very quietly, I saw him. Eli's mouth went dry. Danner said, then fix it. A longer pause. Eli pictured the man's eyes in the crawl space, the way the light had pinned him. I will, the man said. Bootsteps moved toward the laundry door. Eli's muscles locked. He looked around wildly. 2 machines, a rolling cart, a pile of folded sheets on a table, a narrow closet with a mop bucket, and above the dryers, an open vent space where the ductwork ran toward the ceiling. Eli grabbed the edge of the folding table, climbed without thinking, and hauled himself onto the top of a dryer. Hot metal burned through his jeans. He hissed silently and forced himself up, fingers finding the duct ledge. The laundry door opened. The man stepped in. Eli held still on top of the dryer, flattened against the wall, his body hidden by a jut of ductwork and shadow. The man stood there a moment, listening. Eli could see the edge of his cap, the curve of his cheek, the slow way he turned his head. Then he stepped deeper into the laundry room, boots heavy, eyes scanning. Eli's fingers cramped around the duct edge. He could drop onto the man. He could swing the metal bracket. He could... No, that was fantasy. That was how you got killed in a laundry room. The man moved to the folding table, looked at the still warm laundry pile, and frowned. He reached down and lifted a sheet. Eli's cracked phone slipped in his pocket with the smallest plastic tap. The man's head snapped up. Eli didn't wait. He launched himself off the dryer, hit the floor hard, and sprinted through the laundry room door and into the service corridor. Behind him, the man's voice cut through the noise. Eli! Eli ran blind, turning corners, banging a shoulder into a wall, not caring about pain, only distance. He burst through the delivery door and out into the night. The lot lights made the world too bright. Eli swung left, aiming for the darkest edge, only to stop when he saw the motorcycle. It wasn't parked like a guest's bike. It sat angled for a fast exit, engine off but ready, like an animal crouched. A woman leaned against it with her arms folded, helmet hooked on the handlebar, leather jacket, boots. Calm posture like the motel didn't matter to her one bit. Her eyes were on the building, on the laundry door Eli had just exploded out of. Eli stumbled, trying to change direction. You're the kid, the woman said, not asking. Eli froze. She nodded once toward the building. Room 17, she said. Or is it 18 tonight? Eli stared at her, chest heaving. That question wasn't a guess, it was a test. How do you... Eli started. The laundry door behind him banged open. The man with the keycard stepped out, scanning the lot fast, eyes hunting. The biker woman didn't move. She just watched him like she was taking his picture with her brain. Eli whispered, He's not maintenance. The woman's mouth twitched, almost a smile, but not friendly. No, she said. He's the reason I'm here. Her hand slid into her jacket. Not for a weapon. Eli realized it was a phone. She looked at Eli again, voice low and exact. Are you sure you heard a woman? She asked. Not a fight? Not a TV? A woman. Eli swallowed, eyes burning. She begged me, he said, from inside the wall. That was all it took. The woman lifted the phone and tapped once, twice, like she'd been waiting for the right word to unlock a whole different world. Then she brought it to her ear and said, It's confirmed. The man with the keycard started walking toward them, fast now, his calm slipping. The woman didn't look at him. She kept her gaze on Eli. Get behind my bike, she said. Eli took one step, and the first distant engine note rolled off the highway like thunder, low and heavy, multiplying fast. The sound didn't arrive like a single engine. It arrived like weather. A low note rolled off the highway, then another, then a dozen more stacking on top of each other, until the air itself seemed to vibrate. Eli stood half-crouched behind the woman's bike, staring past the motel sign toward the dark ribbon of road, and the noise kept growing until it stopped feeling like vehicles and started feeling like something large and living moving toward them. The man with the keycard took one more step into the lot, eyes locked on Eli. Then he heard it too. His face didn't change much, but his shoulders tightened the way a person tenses when plans shift. He flicked his gaze to the highway, then back to Eli and the woman. He was measuring distance, timing, whether he could finish something before whatever was coming got here. The woman didn't flinch. She stayed leaning on her bike like she owned the night, phone still at her ear. "It's confirmed," she said again, quieter now. "He's outside. Kid's with me." A voice crackled faintly through the speaker, too low for Eli to catch words. The woman answered with 3 clipped pieces of information. "Blue Heron, South Side, laundry door. He's here." She ended the call and finally looked straight at the man with the key card. He stopped walking. They stared at each other across 15 yards of asphalt lit by sickly yellow lot lights. Around them, the motel went on pretending. Curtains twitched. A couple laughed somewhere near the vending machines. Someone shut a car door. Eli could hear his own breathing loud in his ears. The man's hand drifted toward his jacket pocket. The woman's voice stayed calm. "Don't," she said. The man smiled slightly, like he'd just been told a joke he didn't like. "You're lost," he said, voice easy. "This is private property." "I know exactly where I am," she replied, "and so do you." The rumble doubled. Headlights appeared at the far end of the access road. 1 pair, then 3, then 10, their beams bouncing over the uneven pavement. They didn't slow like guests looking for a room. They came in tight formation. The first bikes turned into the lot and spread like a practice drill. 2 blocked the entrance behind the fire truck tracks, then another 2 swung wide and took the side lane, then 3 more rolled straight down the center and stopped in staggered positions that created a corridor of steel and bodies. They were all different machines, cruisers, touring bikes, a few stripped-down builds, but the way they moved was the same, controlled, not showy, not loud for the sake of it. Then more arrived. The motel sign flickered and buzzed as the second wave poured in, engines thumping, headlights sweeping across parked cars and motel doors. Riders cut their lights as they took positions, leaving just enough illumination to see faces. They lined up at the edges of the lot, taking the exits first, like whoever was leading them didn't care about the motel itself yet, only about making sure nobody left. Eli counted without meaning to. 20, 40, 70, then it stopped being countable. Bikes kept coming, filling every gap, rolling in from the highway in groups that looked coordinated by radio, by hand signals, by something Eli couldn't see. A few riders dismounted and walked the perimeter immediately, scanning the fence line, the rear stairwell, the dumpster area. One rider stood at the mouth of the side lane and faced outward, helmet on, arms crossed, blocking it with his body as if it were a door. The sound pressed down on Eli's chest. It wasn't chaos. It was an occupation. The man with the key card took a slow step backward, like the asphalt had turned hot under his shoes. The woman beside Eli finally moved. She stepped away from her bike, placed herself slightly in front of Eli without making it dramatic, and raised 2 fingers to her mouth. She whistled once, sharp. A rider in a black half-helmet looked over from across the lot. He nodded. The woman said, "Stay close," to Eli, then walked forward, straight into the open space between the man and the growing wall of motorcycles. The man with the key card didn't like that. His eyes flicked around, searching for the soft spot that wasn't there. From the motel office, the front door banged open. Mr. Danner came out fast, like he'd been waiting behind the glass and finally panicked. He stopped on the top step, eyes wide as he took in the lot. Hundreds of bikes, riders standing shoulder to shoulder, the exits sealed. His voice cracked as he shouted, "What the hell is this?" Nobody answered him right away. Then, a rider near the center, big, broad gray beard, no helmet, raised a hand, and the engines began to cut. One by one, bikes went quiet. The sudden reduction in noise didn't make the scene calmer. It made it sharper. You could hear shoes on gravel. You could hear someone cough in a room behind a curtain. You could hear Danner's breathing from the steps. The bearded rider spoke without yelling. His voice still carried. "Nobody leaves," he said, "not until law enforcement is here and a building check is done." Danner laughed once, too loud, too fake. You can't do that. You can, the rider said, if you're just standing on a public access road and asking people to stay where they are while you report a felony. Danner's face twitched at the word felony. He stepped down a stair, then stopped again, eyes scanning for a badge, a uniform, anyone official he could latch onto. This is harassment, he snapped. This is intimidation. The woman who'd been with Eli turned her head and looked back at the bearded rider. A quick nod passed between them. Then she turned to Danner. Someone screamed from inside your building, she said. A kid pulled the alarm. You shut it down. You tried to throw him out. Then your maintenance guy went hunting for him. Danner's mouth opened and closed. His gaze slid, unwilling, toward the man with the keycard. The man stood near the laundry door now, slightly turned as if he could melt back inside if he needed. His face was still calm, but his eyes looked colder. Danner forced himself back into anger. I have no idea who any of you people are, he said. This kid, he pointed at Eli without looking at him directly, is a liar. He's a thief. He causes trouble. Eli's stomach tightened, but he didn't step forward. Not now, not into that spotlight. A curtain on the first floor snapped open. A guest stuck his head out, phone raised, recording. Another door opened. A woman in a robe stood in the doorway, staring at the bikes like she'd walked into the wrong movie. The woman with Eli lifted her voice just enough for the guests to hear. Does anyone here think a kid should be thrown out for reporting screaming? A few people glanced away. Nobody spoke. Danner's eyes darted to the bearded rider again. You're not cops, he said. You can't block my business. The bearded rider nodded once, like Danner had finally said something useful. He reached into his vest pocket and pulled out his phone. Then you'll be happy to see we already called them. As if on cue, distant sirens started to rise. Danner's head snapped toward the road. The man with the keycard didn't look at the sirens. He looked at Eli again, like the sirens were just noise, and Eli was still the real problem. The woman returned to Eli's side, her tone low now, private. What's your name? Eli, he said. She nodded. Eli, I'm Mara. Who are you? Eli asked, voice shaking despite himself. Mara didn't answer with a club name or a slogan. She kept it simple. People who look for the ones who disappear, she said. People who got tired of waiting for somebody else to care. Eli swallowed. She's in the wall, he whispered. I heard her. I opened a vent in the crawl space. Then he flicked his eyes toward the keycard man. He came down after me. Mara's jaw tightened, the first real emotion she'd shown. Not fear. Focus. She motioned subtly, and one of the riders, thin guy with tattoos up his neck, moved closer. He didn't crowd Eli, just positioned himself so that if anyone rushed them, they'd have to go through him first. Mara spoke again, louder, addressing the bearded rider. He confirms a female victim behind a wall near room 17, she said. Crawl space access and fresh patchwork. That did something to the line of bikers. Heads turned, bodies shifted, the mood hardened. Danner heard it too. His face paled, then flushed. That's insane, he barked. There's no... A sharp cry cut him off. It came from upstairs. A door on the second-floor walkway flew open. A man stumbled out, shirt half-buttoned, yelling toward the office. My bathroom's flooding. Water's coming up. What the hell's going on? More doors opened. Someone shouted from another room. My sink's spitting air. A pipe somewhere in the building knocked like a hammer. Danner flinched, like the building itself had betrayed him. Mara looked at Eli, understanding flickering in her eyes. You did something. Eli didn't deny it. I turned a valve, he said, in the crawl space. Mara's lips pressed into a thin line. Good, she said. That forces movement. Because it did. Eli could see it happen. The man with the keycard shifted his weight, eyes scanning the second-floor walkway where guests were now leaning over railings, shouting, confused, distracted. The distraction made it easier to move someone, harder to track. The keycard man turned slightly toward the laundry door. Mara saw it. She lifted her hand. Two bikes that had been idling near the side lane rolled forward silently, blocking the laundry entrance like a gate closing. The riders didn't rev. They didn't threaten. They just stopped in the exact place a person would need to pass. The keycard man stopped too. For the first time, his calm cracked at the edges. He stepped toward the bikes, expression polite but eyes hard. Excuse me, he said. I need to get to work. Plumbing issue. One rider tilted his head as if listening to the words, then said, "No." The simplicity of it hit like a slap. The keycard man smiled again, thinner. "You don't want to do this." The rider stared back. "You don't want to do this." Sirens got louder. Red and blue lights started to wash across the motel sign and the chrome of the bikes. A sheriff's SUV turned into the lot hard, tires crunching gravel, followed by another, then a county cruiser. They braked near the entrance and stopped short when they realized the entrance was no longer an entrance. Deputies stepped out fast, hands on belts, eyes widening at the scale of what they'd driven into. One of them lifted a megaphone. Mara leaned closer to Eli and said, "Whatever happens next, you don't talk to Danner. You talk to me or you talk to the deputy with the clean hands." "How do you know?" Eli started. Mara didn't answer. She was watching the deputies, watching how they looked at the bikes, watching who seemed annoyed and who seemed cautious, watching who scanned the building instead of the riders. The megaphone crackled. "Everyone remain calm. This is the county sheriff's office. What's going on here?" The bearded rider stepped forward into the open lane between the cruisers and the wall of bikes. He held his hands visible. No sudden moves, no drama. He spoke loud enough without the megaphone. "We're reporting a kidnapping and unlawful confinement," he said. "Possible trafficking. We have a witness. We have a specific room and wall section. We're requesting immediate entry and search." Danner exploded off the steps, voice high. "That's a lie. You can't just, this is my property." A deputy pointed at Danner. "Sir, step back." Danner hesitated, then obeyed half a step like obedience was poison. The man with the keycard didn't speak. He stood near the laundry door, shoulders loose, eyes down, like a man who suddenly understood he wasn't in control of the room anymore. Eli watched him carefully. The keycard man's hand moved again, small, deliberate, toward his pocket. Mara saw it at the same time. She shifted her stance 1 foot forward and said quietly, "Eli, behind me. Now." Eli stepped back. The keycard man's fingers closed around something in his pocket. Then he looked up, straight at Eli, and smiled like he'd made a choice. And Eli saw the thin edge of plastic slide into the man's palm. Not a phone, not keys. A second keycard. The second keycard flashed in the lot light like a sliver of ice. Eli watched the man's fingers close around it, calm, precise, while deputies fanned out near their cruisers, hands hovering at belts, eyes bouncing between 200 motorcycles in a motel that suddenly felt too small to hold what was happening. Mara stepped a fraction closer to Eli, her shoulder shielding him without touching him. "Look at me," she said under her breath. "Don't stare him down. He wants you locked on him." Eli forced his eyes to Mara's chin, not the man's face. His throat was so tight he could barely breathe. The deputy with the megaphone kept talking, voice amplified and thin. "Everyone remain where you are. This is an active scene. Do not obstruct law enforcement." The bearded rider in the center held his hands open like he was negotiating with weather. "We're not obstructing," he said. "We're reporting. Witnesses here. Room and wall location is specific." Mr. Danner was vibrating with rage on the office steps. "This is my business," he shouted. "They're trespassing. They're intimidating my guests." A deputy snapped back. "Sir, step down off the steps." Danner did, but his eyes never stopped moving. They hit Eli like darts. They hit Mara. They hit the riders blocking the side lane. Then they flicked to the second-floor walkway where half a dozen doors were open now because the plumbing was acting like it had a mind of its own. Up there, a guest leaned over the railing, phone out, yelling, "Who do I sue about this? My room's flooding." Eli's valve turn was still echoing through the building. Mara's gaze didn't leave the keycard man. "He's going to move," she murmured. "He's deciding if he can still finish." The keycard man smiled at nobody in particular, and Eli understood what that smile was. A door closing, not on the motel, on a person. Then the man turned his body slightly, not toward the laundry entrance where 2 bikes were parked like a steel gate, but toward the far stairwell, the rear one, the one Eli had found locked earlier. He wasn't walking to it as a guest. He was walking like he knew exactly what key opened it. Mara lifted her hand 2 inches, a small signal. 2 riders on the perimeter shifted at once, eyes tracking the same line. The deputies noticed movement and tensed. One of them raised a hand. "Hey, stop where you are!" The keycard man stopped, palms open in a harmless gesture. "Deputy," he said smoothly. I work here. Maintenance, plumbing's busted. People are flooding. Let me do my job. He had the right tone. Respectful, helpful, reasonable. The deputy hesitated, just long enough. Danner jumped on it. Yes, he snapped. That's my maintenance guy. Let him through. He's fixing the pipes. Mara's face didn't change, but her voice sharpened. He's not maintenance, she said, loud enough for the deputies. He chased a kid into a crawl space with a flashlight. He's the one you need to keep eyes on. A deputy looked from Mara to Eli, then to the keycard man. Ma'am, who are you? Witness advocate, Mara lied without blinking. Then she corrected herself because she didn't like lying to cops. Civilian. The witness is the kid. The facts are the facts. The bearded rider stepped closer to the deputies, still calm. There's an immediate danger claim, he said. Screams, confinement. You don't need our permission to check a wall if someone's alive behind it. The megaphone deputy's jaw flexed. You can't box in a property like this. You can't box in a victim, Mara replied. The standoff tightened. Deputies were trying to control a scene that didn't fit their usual boxes. Too many civilians, too many cameras, too much noise. And right in the middle of it all stood a kid with no parents, and the kind of fear that made adults decide he was trouble by default. A second sheriff's vehicle rolled in, unmarked, dark, with a single dashboard light pulsing. It didn't stop at the entrance like the others. It pushed in farther, slow and deliberate, until it was close enough that the driver could step out and see faces. A man in a plain jacket got out, not a uniform, not a deputy. Older than the rest, eyes sharper, movements economical. He scanned the lot once and didn't look intimidated by the motorcycles. He looked annoyed that time was being wasted. He walked straight to the megaphone deputy. What's the call? Possible, the deputy started. Not possible, the bearded rider cut in. Witness heard a female victim behind a wall, specific room, specific wall seam, blood observed. The plainclothes man's eyes shifted to Mara, then to Eli. You, he said to Eli, not unkind, just direct. Name, Eli's voice came out thin. Eli. You pulled the alarm? Yes. Why? Eli forced the words out in order, because if he lost the thread, he'd lose everything. I heard screaming behind room 17, not a TV, not a fight, a woman. Then I saw blood at the baseboard and a fresh panel cut into the wall. The plainclothes man didn't look at Danner. He didn't look at the bikers. He looked only at Eli. You saw blood? Yes. And you can take me to it. Eli nodded so hard it hurt. The man finally turned to Danner. Manager? Danner lifted his chin. Yes, this is ridiculous. This kid... Keys, the plainclothes man said. Danner blinked. Excuse me? Master Keys, now. The man's voice stayed flat. We have exigent circumstances. You can argue with the judge later. Danner's face flushed. You can't just... The plainclothes man leaned slightly closer. My name is Detective Rusk, he said, and somehow the lot got quieter around the word detective. If you delay while someone is trapped, you're not a bystander. You're involved. Hand me the keys. Danner's eyes flicked to the keycard man like a reflex. That was all Rusk needed to see. Rusk snapped his head toward the megaphone deputy. Keep that maintenance guy in sight. If he moves, you move. The deputy nodded, suddenly grateful for clear orders. The keycard man's calm held, but it thinned. He took a step back, as if giving space, as if compliance was his idea. Mara leaned toward Eli. That's your clean hands, she murmured. Stay with him. Eli nodded, then swallowed. He'll move her, he whispered. If he gets inside, Mara's eyes stayed on the keycard man's shoulders. He already has, she said quietly. We're just trying to catch him before he finishes. Detective Rusk held his hand out. Danner's jaw worked as if chewing metal, then he reached into his pocket and slapped a jangling ring of keys into Rusk's palm like an insult. Rusk turned to Eli. You walk in front of me, you do exactly what I say. You don't touch anything. You point, you speak. Understood? Yes, Eli said, breath catching. Rusk motioned to one deputy. You're with me, then to another. You stay outside with perimeter and keep these people from getting stupid. The bearded rider lifted his hands. We're not here to get stupid. Good, Rusk said, not looking at him. Then don't. Rusk started toward the lobby doors with Eli. Danner surged forward. You can't bring that kid. Rusk cut him off without turning. If he's lying, you're clean. If he's right, you're done. Pick which future you want and be quiet. Eli felt Mara's hand touch the back of his hoodie for the first time. Just 2 fingers, guiding. Go, she said. Eli walked. His legs felt like borrowed parts. As they reached the lobby, Eli glanced back once. Just once. The keycard man stood near the laundry side, hands relaxed, face neutral. But his eyes were following Eli like a scope. And then, while everyone's attention tilted toward the detective entering the building, the keycard man turned his body a fraction toward the rear stairwell again. One of the perimeter riders noticed and stepped into the line. The keycard man stopped, smiled politely. It was a chess move, not a standoff. Inside the lobby, the air was stale and overwarmed, with the faint bite of bleach that Eli now associated with panic. The carpet smelled like old smoke. The desk bell sat crooked. Rhonda wasn't there. Rusk didn't waste time. Where? Eli led them past the vending machines into the corridor. Every step made his skin prickle. The motel felt different now that he knew what could be hidden in its walls. They passed doors with "Do Not Disturb" signs, past a family suitcase propped against a chair, past a room where a TV blared too loud like someone was trying to drown out reality. At the dead-end corridor, Eli slowed. Room 17 sat exactly where it had sat an hour ago, like a normal door on a normal night. Except the air around it still carried that chemical sharpness, and the carpet near the baseboard looked darker, as if it had been damp and half scrubbed. Eli pointed. Here. Rusk stepped closer, crouched, and ran 2 fingers along the baseboard seam. He lifted his fingers. Dark red. Not paint. Not rust. Rusk's eyes hardened. He looked up at the door. Is it still blocked? Eli nodded. It was. Rusk tried the handle. Locked. He inserted the master key. The lock clicked. Rusk pushed. The door shifted a fraction and stopped, braced from inside by something heavy, exactly like before. The deputy behind Rusk swore under his breath. Rusk didn't swear. He went still, listening. For a few seconds there was nothing but the hum of the soda machine around the corner and the distant gurgle of unhappy plumbing somewhere upstairs. Then, faint as a heartbeat, something tapped behind the drywall beside the door. 1. Pause. 2. Eli's eyes stung instantly. That's her, he whispered. Rusk's jaw clenched. He angled his flashlight along the wall line, and his beam caught what Eli had seen, the hairline seam of a rectangle cut into the wall, 2 screw heads half buried under fresh paint. A patch that didn't belong. This isn't a normal access panel, the deputy said. No, Rusk replied. It's a trap. He straightened and looked at Eli. You said crawl space. Eli nodded fast. There's a vent opening down there. She whispered to me. He chased me out. Rusk's eyes flicked once toward the ceiling as if measuring. We don't have time to go under, he said. If she's alive, she's losing air. He motioned to the deputy. Get a pry bar, now. The deputy turned and jogged back down the hall. Rusk pulled out his radio. Control, we have probable unlawful confinement. Start EMS. Start state if you need to. And keep eyes on anyone claiming maintenance. Eli's chest heaved. He wanted to do something, anything, but Rusk had said, don't touch. He stood there, hands clenched at his sides, staring at the seam in the wall like it was a mouth holding its breath. The tapping behind the drywall stopped. Then a whisper came through, so soft Eli wasn't sure it was real at first. Help! Rusk's eyes locked on the panel. Ma'am, he said, voice steady and loud enough to carry through insulation. You're not alone. We're opening the wall. Stay with me. A faint sob answered. Footsteps pounded back down the hall, the deputy returning with a pry bar and a flat screwdriver. He handed them over like they were holy objects. Rusk wedged the screwdriver into the paint seam and twisted. The drywall flexed, the seam widened by a hair. Cold air leaked out, carrying bleach and sweat and something metallic underneath. Rusk slid the pry bar in and leaned his weight. The panel creaked. Eli held his breath as the rectangle of wall began to lift, millimeter by millimeter, like a door that had never been meant to open. And from the darkness behind it, a trembling hand reached out and found the edge. The panel finally gave with a sound like a rib cracking. Detective Rusk leaned harder on the pry bar, and the rectangle of drywall popped free. Dust and paint flakes fell onto the carpet. Cold, stale air spilled out of the cavity, bleach trying to drown out the human smell underneath. A hand came through first, pale, shaking, fingers bruised at the knuckles like she'd been pounding for hours. Russ caught her wrist gently, careful not to yank. "Ma'am, I've got you," he said. "Don't fight the opening." "Let us do it." Eli stayed frozen, eyes locked on that hand, because it proved he hadn't imagined any of it. It proved the motel had been lying with a straight face. The deputy widened the opening, peeling drywall away in jagged chunks. Behind it was not insulation like it should have been. It was a second surface, thin plywood screwed to studs, seams taped, soundproof foam wedged tight around it. Someone had built a box inside the wall. Rusk's face hardened. "That's deliberate," he said. He braced his shoulder against the plywood and shoved. The wood resisted, then shifted a fraction. A latch clicked from inside, weak, like it had been rigged for someone else to open, but not from the outside. "Help," the voice whispered again, closer now, and then the plywood swung inward just enough for Eli to see an eye in the dark, wide, bloodshot, blinking like it couldn't believe light existed. Eli's throat tightened. "It's okay," he said too fast. "It's okay. We're here." Rusk shot him a quick look. "Stay calm, stay quiet," then addressed the girl. "I'm opening it. Keep your hands where I can see them." The plywood gave another inch. The deputy wedged the pry bar and forced it wider. The space inside was barely bigger than a closet. Foam panels lined the studs. A small vent pipe ran up and out, thin, meant to keep someone alive, not comfortable. A blanket lay crumpled in the corner, and beside it a plastic bottle with a straw taped to it, like whoever built this knew exactly how long a person could last without water. The girl crawled forward on her elbows because her legs didn't seem to work right. Her hair was matted. A strip of duct tape hung torn from her wrist. Her cheeks were hollow, eyes too big for her face. Rusk reached in and slid his arms under her carefully. "Easy," he said. "You're safe. We're getting you out." She flinched at the word safe like it was a trap. Eli saw the detail that made him feel sick. A zip tie looped around a stud inside the cavity, and on the floor beneath it, a few short strands of hair, like someone had been pulled hard enough to leave pieces behind. The deputy helped Rusk lift the girl out. She sagged against Rusk's chest, trembling, her lips moving with soundless words. Then her gaze flicked past Rusk, past Eli, toward the corridor behind them. "Don't let him," she rasped. "Don't let him touch me." Rusk turned his head slightly. "Who?" She tried to point, but her hand shook too much. Her eyes filled with tears. "The one with the keys," she whispered. "He comes when it's quiet." Eli's stomach dropped. The keycard man. Rusk didn't ask more in the hallway. He glanced at the deputy. "Get her to the lobby. EMS is coming. Nobody else touches her." The deputy nodded, suddenly gentler, and took the girl with both arms like she was fragile glass. She clutched his sleeve with desperate fingers. Eli stepped aside to let them pass, and the girl's eyes locked on him for a second. Not gratitude, recognition, like she'd heard his voice in the dark and hadn't known if it was real. "Thank you," she breathed, barely there. Eli's chest cracked open around the word. Rusk stayed by the opening, flashlight cutting into the cavity. "This isn't the only thing in here," he said. He leaned in and swept the beam across the floor and the stud space. Foam, tape, a second bottle, a small plastic baggie tucked behind the blanket. Rusk reached in with 2 fingers and pulled it out. Inside were pills, white and chalky, some crushed into powder. A strip of blister packaging with half the tablets missing. "Sedatives," the deputy murmured, seeing it. Rusk handed it to him without looking away from the hole. "Bag it." More things appeared as Rusk searched. A burner phone wrapped in plastic to protect it from moisture, wedged under a foam panel, a folded sheet of paper taped to the back of the plywood, covered in numbers, room names, times, arrows. Not a diary, a schedule. Eli stared at it, trying not to throw up. It looked like the motel's own ledger, except the entries weren't for guests, they were for transfers. Rusk tore the paper free and folded it into his pocket. "Control," he said into his radio, voice clipped. "We have an unlawful confinement compartment built into the wall. 1 female recovered alive. Evidence of drugs and a schedule. Treat this as trafficking until proven otherwise." A crackle answered. Eli caught only fragments. EMS minutes out, perimeter, units arriving. Rusk looked at Eli. You said you went under the building. Crawlspace access is near here? Eli nodded. Behind the bushes, back corner, a window. Rusk's eyes sharpened. We're going to need it. This compartment has to connect to something. Someone built it and someone services it. Eli swallowed. He went down there after me. Rusk didn't ask who. He already knew. Then we're not letting him vanish. Rusk stepped into the corridor and moved toward the lobby at a fast walk. Eli followed, keeping close, because being alone in this building suddenly felt impossible. As they reached the lobby, the noise from outside hit them, voices raised, boots on gravel, a megaphone calling for calm. Through the glass doors, red and blue lights washed across a wall of motorcycles and the dark shapes of riders standing like a fence. Rhonda stood behind the desk now, face gray, hands shaking so hard she couldn't hold her phone steady. When she saw the girl in the deputy's arms, her mouth fell open. She made a broken sound like she'd been punched. Jesus, she whispered. The girl clung tighter, eyes darting, breath quickening like she expected someone to snatch her back. Rusk didn't slow. He pushed through the front doors with Eli at his shoulder. Cold air slapped Eli's face. The lot was brighter now with all the emergency lights, but the mood had turned darker, tighter. Deputies were trying to create space, pushing guests back toward the building, ordering riders to step away from the entrance. The riders didn't move much. They didn't need to. They were already where they wanted to be. Mara spotted Eli instantly. Her eyes flicked to Rusk, then to Eli, and then to the girl being carried toward the waiting ambulance lights pulling into the access road. Rusk lifted his voice. "We have a live victim," he announced, loud enough to cut through everything. The effect was immediate. Guests went silent. A few phones dropped slightly. Danner's face drained of color so fast he looked sick. Then Danner found his voice and tried to reclaim the scene with it. This is, he stammered. I didn't know. This is on him." He pointed toward the laundry side where the keycard man had been standing earlier. "That guy, he's maintenance. Rusk's head snapped toward the laundry entrance. Eli followed his gaze and his stomach dropped again. The two bikes that had blocked the laundry door were still there, but their riders were turned outward now, attention split between deputies and shouting guests. And in that split-second gap, a narrow lane had opened. Empty lane. No keycard man in sight. Mara moved before anyone else did. She pushed through two riders and pointed, sharp. "Back stairwell," she said. He was testing it. One of the perimeter riders answered with a short nod and sprinted along the fence line toward the rear of the building. Another rider moved to cut off the side path by the dumpsters. A deputy shouted, "Ma'am, step back." Mara didn't. She looked at Rusk instead. "He'll try to move evidence," she said, "or a second victim." Rusk's jaw flexed. He spoke into his radio. "All units, possible suspect male, dark jacket, cap, carrying tool bag, keycard. Last seen near laundry door. Lockdown rear stairwell and service corridors. Nobody leaves." Danner's eyes were wild now. "You can't. My guests—" A deputy grabbed Danner by the elbow and shoved him back toward the office steps. "Sir, put your hands where I can see them," Danner sputtered. "I'm the victim here." Rusk ignored him. He looked at Eli. "You can identify him." Eli's skin prickled. "Yes." Rusk pointed toward the building. "Then you stay with me. You don't run. You don't chase. If you lose sight of me, you freeze. Understood?" Eli nodded, throat dry. Mara stepped in close, voice low. "Eli," she said, "look at me." When he did, she softened for the first time. "You did the hard part. Now don't get killed doing the rest." Eli swallowed. She said, "The one with the keys," he whispered. "He comes when it's quiet." Mara's eyes flicked toward the motel. "Then we make it loud," she said. Rusk and two deputies moved toward the lobby doors again, faster now. Eli followed, feeling the weight of everyone's eyes on his back. Guests, bikers, Danner, like he'd become the only thread connecting this place to the truth. As they crossed the threshold, Eli heard a sharp sound from the side of the building, metal scraping, then a door thumping shut. Rusk spun toward the service corridor. Eli's heart slammed once, hard, because he knew that sound. It was the laundry door's lock catching, from inside. The laundry door's lock clicked with a final satisfied sound. Detective Rusk didn't hesitate. He moved like the decision had already been made in his head. "Back," he ordered, and Eli took 2 steps away from the service corridor entrance as Rusk slammed his shoulder into the door. It barely flexed, solid core, reinforced frame. Not a door meant to be forced. Rusk hit it again, harder. The hinge groaned but held. The deputy behind him raised the pry bar. "On 3. Before we continue, drop a comment telling us where you're watching from, because what happened in the next 60 seconds wasn't a fight in a motel hallway. It was a race against someone who knew every hidden seam of the building." 1, Rusk said. The deputy wedged the pry bar into the frame. 2. Rusk braced, jaw tight. 3. They drove the bar in and leveraged. Wood cracked. The door jumped a fraction, then stopped again like it was latched twice. From the other side came a sound Eli recognized instantly, the quick metallic rattle of a tool bag being dumped. Something heavy hit the floor. Then a sharp scrape, like furniture being dragged into place. "He's barricading," the deputy muttered. Rusk put his radio to his mouth. "Control, suspect has locked himself into service corridor via laundry access. We're forcing. Start another unit to rear stairwell, now." The radio answered with overlapping voices. Units moving. Perimeter. EMS staging. Too much noise, too many directions. Rusk turned his head and looked at Eli. "Other way in," he said, not a question. Eli's brain kicked into map mode. "Delivery door," he said fast. "Warped frame. I used it earlier. It opens." Rusk pointed. "Go." Eli ran. He didn't run like a hero. He ran like a kid who'd learned the only way to stay alive was to move before adults decided you were the problem. He sprinted down the corridor, shoes slapping carpet, cutting past the vending machines, past a door where someone shouted about water, past a family dragging bags like they thought leaving would erase what they'd been sleeping beside. Rusk and the deputy followed, boots heavy, radio crackling. Eli hit the delivery door and yanked. It opened into cold night. Outside, the lot had changed. The bikes were still there, but now deputies were setting a loose line, trying to keep guests from wandering into it. An ambulance had pulled in near the office, lights flashing white-blue against the motel sign. A medic crouched beside the recovered girl on a stretcher, checking her pupils, speaking softly into her ear. Mara was near the line of riders, head turned, listening to a handheld radio like she'd always had one. She saw Eli and Russ come out and immediately looked past them toward the rear of the building. Something was happening back there. A dark vehicle rolled slow along the fence line with its lights off, creeping like it belonged. Not a guest, not a deputy, too deliberate. It hugged the shadowed lane by the dumpsters where the motel's back service access sat. Mara's eyes narrowed. She raised 2 fingers and made a small circular motion. 3 bikes detached from the perimeter without revving, without drama. They rolled like a door closing. The dark vehicle saw them too late. It tapped the brakes, tried to turn out, but another pair of bikes slid in behind it, blocking the lane from the other side. The vehicle was boxed in between chrome and chain link, trapped in a pocket of shadow. Eli heard a horn blip, one short sound, like a signal. Mara spoke into her radio. "Backlot, black van, we got it." Rusk's head snapped toward the scene. "That yours?" he asked Mara. "Not ours," she said. "Theirs." Rusk didn't waste time arguing with that. He motioned to the deputy. "You go with 2 units, secure that vehicle. Don't let anyone out. Don't let anything be moved." Then he looked at Eli. "You stay on my hip." Eli did. They moved along the side of the building toward the laundry entrance from outside. The 2 bikes that had been blocking it still sat there, riders now facing the door like a guard post. Their posture was calm, but Eli could see it in their hands and eyes. Everything ready. Rusk approached, badge visible. "Step back," he told them. They did immediately, no attitude. The issue wasn't the riders. The issue was what was locked behind that door. Rusk tried the handle. Dead. He leaned in, listening. Eli leaned too, holding his breath. Inside, something thumped, soft, then harder. A cabinet door, a drawer yanked, a quick burst of plastic crinkling, evidence being moved. Rusk stepped back and nodded once to the deputy who'd stayed with him. "Force it." The deputy jammed the pry bar into the seam between frame and door. Rusk pressed a hand against the door, anchoring it. The bar bit. The wood complained. Then the lock gave. The laundry door swung inward sharply, and for a split second, Eli saw the room beyond. Stainless steel machines, carts, steam haze near the ceiling, and The keycard man. He stood at the folding table, tool bag open, hands moving fast. He wasn't panicking, he was working. On the table were items laid out like parts: a phone, a small plastic pouch, a roll of tape, and something that looked like a keyring with tags. He turned when the door flew open, and his expression didn't show surprise, only irritation. Rusk snapped, "Hands, now!" The man lifted his hands, palms open, the picture of compliance. "Detective," he said, and Eli's blood chilled. He'd clocked Rusk's rank instantly. "This is unnecessary. Plumbing issue. Guests are—" Rusk moved 2 steps in, gun still holstered but presence absolute. "Step away from the table." The man did, slowly, carefully, like he was showing he had nothing. Eli saw the detail that made it worse: the man's other keycard, still in his right palm, half hidden by the curve of his fingers. Mara's voice came from behind, low and sharp. "He's got something in his hand." The man smiled slightly. "Ma'am, you're confused." Rusk's gaze flicked to the man's hand. "Open it." The man held Rusk's eyes for a heartbeat longer than necessary. Then he opened his fingers. The keycard dropped onto the laundry floor with a soft slap. Rusk didn't relax. "Turn around, hands behind your back." The man's smile didn't move, but his eyes did. They slid past Rusk's shoulder, toward the service corridor door that led deeper into the motel, toward a route. Eli's stomach tightened. He knew that look. The look right before someone runs. Rusk saw it too. "Now," he snapped. The man exhaled as if annoyed by a chore, turned halfway. Then instead of placing his hands behind his back, he swung his left arm outward and threw something small and dark across the room. It wasn't a weapon, it was a phone. It skidded under a washing machine, screen flashing once before going dark. Rusk lunged for the man, but the man moved first, faster than he looked. He slammed his shoulder into Rusk's chest and bolted through the inner laundry door into the service corridor, knocking a cart sideways. Metal clanged, steam hissed, the whole room became noise. "Go!" Rusk shouted to the deputy, and they tore after him. Eli chased without thinking until Rusk barked, "Eli, stay back!" Eli stopped hard, chest heaving, because he'd promised, because if he ran into that corridor alone, he'd die in it. Mara grabbed Eli's arm and yanked him behind the laundry doorframe. "Don't," she said. "Let them do it." Eli's eyes burned. "He'll get away." Mara's jaw tightened. "Not tonight." Down the corridor, boots pounded. Rusk's voice echoed, "Stop! Sheriff's office!" A door slammed somewhere deeper in the motel, then another. Guests screamed, thinking the danger was fire or flooding or bikers. They didn't understand that the danger was a man who moved like he belonged anywhere. Mara leaned out, spoke into a radio. "Runner inside, service corridor. Cut him off at rear stairwell." A voice answered instantly, clipped. "Copy." Outside, the boxed-in van in the back lane rocked slightly, like someone inside had shifted. 2 riders approached it cautiously, not touching the doors, just watching. One of them called out, "Hands where we can see them." The van went still. Inside the laundry room, the deputy who'd stayed behind slid to his knees and reached under the washer for the tossed phone. He pulled it out with 2 fingers like it was dirty. The screen had cracked on impact, but it was still warm, still on. Rusk's shout echoed faintly from down the corridor. "He's heading back!" Then footsteps reversed, fast. Eli's pulse spiked. The man was coming back toward the laundry entrance, toward them. Mara pushed Eli behind her again. "Stay behind me," she said. The deputy with the phone rose, eyes wide. "Detective?" Rusk appeared first around the corner, moving backward, gun now drawn but pointed down, trying to keep space while not shooting in a motel full of people. "Back up," he ordered. Behind him, the keycard man came into view at a near jog, not sprinting, controlling speed, controlling breathing. He had something in his hand now, a small canister. Rusk saw it. "Drop it!" The man flicked his wrist and threw the canister toward the laundry room doorway. Rusk moved like instinct, like training. He kicked it sideways with his boot. The canister rolled and hit the wall, spinning. A thin, sharp hiss erupted. A chemical cloud bloomed low to the floor, white and angry. "Back!" Rusk shouted, and shoved the deputy and Eli away from the doorway. Mara grabbed Eli and hauled him farther, coughing already. The keycard man used the moment exactly as intended. He pivoted away from the laundry entrance, cut left down the outer walkway, and headed toward the back of the building, toward the rear stairwell. Eli watched him vanish into the darker stretch between rooms, and his chest filled with cold panic. Because if he reached the rear stairwell, he wasn't just reaching an exit. He was reaching the crawlspace window. He was reaching the patchwork under the floor. He was reaching whatever else had been built into this motel's bones. Rusk waved his hand through the stinging air and shouted into his radio, voice raw. "He's moving rear stairwell, now!" Outside, engines sparked to life in short bursts, not revving, not showing off. Position changes, doors closing. Mara didn't chase. She looked at Eli instead, eyes hard. "Which window?" she demanded. "Exactly?" Eli swallowed through the chemical sting. "Back corner, bushes, maintenance window." Mara nodded once, already turning. "Then that's where he's going," she said. And Eli heard from the back of the property the first heavy slam of metal against metal, like someone had yanked open a hatch nobody was supposed to touch. The back corner of the property was darker than it should have been, even with all the emergency lights washing the front lot. The Blue Heron's rear lane sat behind the building like a blind spot. Dumpsters, chain link, a strip of dead hedges, and the maintenance window half hidden under branches. Eli heard that heavy slam again, metal on metal, followed by a quick scrape, like someone dragging something across concrete. Mara was already moving, jogging low along the fence line with two riders flanking her, boots barely crunching gravel. Eli ran behind her because there was nowhere else to go that didn't feel like abandoning the girl they'd pulled out. Rusk came last, still coughing from the chemical cloud, one hand up to his mouth, radio in the other. "Rear stairwell, now!" he barked into it, voice raw. "If you see him, do not engage alone. Hold and call." A deputy appeared at the end of the rear walkway, flashlight beam bouncing. "Detective, I heard—" "Shut the stairwell," Rusk snapped. "Lock it down." The deputy moved, but Mara reached the corner first. The bushes were crushed, wet with sprayed water from the messed-up plumbing line. The maintenance window Eli had used was open wider now, shoved up hard. Dirt was scraped raw beneath it like someone had scrambled through in a hurry. "He's in," Eli said, breathless. Mara crouched, peered into the black rectangle. The smell rolled out, damp earth, bleach, and something else under it. Human, panic sweat, old fabric. One of the riders beside her pulled a small flashlight and swept the beam inside. The light caught a boot print in the dirt, fresh and deep. Then another. Then the shiny edge of something metal, like a dropped tool. "He didn't go far," the rider said. Rusk arrived and took one look. "Nobody goes in without backup," he ordered. Mara didn't argue. She didn't have to. Her role wasn't to be the hero in the hole. Her role was to make sure the hole didn't become an escape route. She raised her hand and made a short slicing signal. Two more bikes rolled into the rear lane without revving, stopping at angles that blocked the lane from both directions. Riders dismounted and took positions by the fence, by the dumpsters, by the rear stairwell door. The back of the motel was now sealed the way the front had been. Quiet, controlled, unavoidable. Rusk pointed at Eli. "Stay here. You point. You don't go under." Eli's throat tightened, but he nodded. From under the building came a faint sound, so soft it could have been a pipe settling. Then another, the scrape of a knee on dirt. Rusk keyed his radio. "K9 available?" a voice crackled back. 10 out. "Make it 5, Rusk said. "He's under the structure." Mara kept her eyes on the window. "He's not just running," she murmured. "He's doing something." Eli felt it too. The keycard man didn't sprint like someone panicking. He moved like someone completing steps. From the front lot, a wail rose, the thin, sharp sound of someone crying in a way that finally sounded safe enough to let go. Eli turned his head and saw the ambulance parked near the office, doors open, medics working over the girl they'd recovered. The stretcher's white sheet looked blinding under the strobe lights. Rhonda stood near the ambulance, hands pressed to her mouth, shoulders shaking. Danner stood farther back, trapped between deputies and bikers, shouting at anyone who would look at him. I didn't know. You can't do this to me." Nobody cared. A medic looked up and motioned urgently at Rusk. "Detective, we need you, now." Rusk's gaze flicked between the crawlspace window and the ambulance. He made a choice. He jerked his chin at a deputy. "Hold this. Nobody enters, nobody leaves." Then, to Mara, fast and low. "If he comes out, you call it. You don't touch him unless you have to." Mara gave a short nod. "Go." Rusk sprinted back toward the front, and Eli went with him because he was tethered to Rusk's orders like a lifeline. As they reached the ambulance, the girl was propped slightly upright on the stretcher. Her skin looked gray under the lights. A medic had an oxygen mask near her face. Another was checking her wrists, documenting bruises. When the girl saw Rusk, her eyes widened and she started to breathe faster again. Rusk lowered his voice instantly. "Hey," he said, steady. "You're doing good. You're safe. I need one thing from you, okay?" She stared at him like she didn't trust the word safe, but she nodded once. "Name," Rusk said. Her lips trembled. "Talia," she whispered. Rusk kept it gentle. "Talia, I'm Detective Rusk. The kid who heard you, Eli, he's right here." He angled his body slightly so she could see Eli without being overwhelmed. Talia's gaze slid to Eli and locked. Her eyes filled, and she shook her head like she still couldn't believe he was real. Eli swallowed. "I'm here," he said softly. Talia's fingers tightened on the stretcher sheet. She tried, then choked. A medic squeezed her shoulder and told her to breathe. Rusk leaned in. "Look at me, Talia. Who is he?" Her eyes flicked toward the building, then toward the back lot, as if the direction itself hurt. "The man with the keys," she whispered. "He wears a cap." Rusk didn't react outwardly, but Eli saw his jaw tighten. "Any marks?" Rusk asked. "Tattoo, patch, anything you remember." Talia swallowed hard. "On his wrist," she said, "when he grabbed me. A symbol." The medic paused, pen hovering. Rusk's voice stayed calm. "What symbol?" Talia squeezed her eyes shut like she was forcing the image into the light. "3 lines," she whispered, "like claw marks. And a small circle under them." Mara, who had followed them halfway before turning back toward the rear, froze when she heard that. Her head snapped toward Talia. "Say that again." Rusk looked at Mara sharply. "You know it." Mara nodded once, slow. "We've seen it on burner phones," she said, "on packages, on receipts that shouldn't exist." Her voice went flatter. "It's a tag. It means transfer." A murmur moved through nearby riders, tight, angry, controlled. Rusk didn't let it expand into noise. "How long were you in there?" he asked Talia. Talia's lips moved. "I don't know," she breathed. "No windows, just quiet. Then loud, then quiet again. He comes when it's quiet." Eli felt sick. That sentence hit him like a chain. Quiet meant safe for the monster. Rusk asked, "Were you alone?" Talia's eyes snapped open. "No," she said, instantly panicked. There's another." Eli's heart dropped through the asphalt. "A second victim?" Rusk pressed. Talia nodded hard, then winced like her head hurt. "A girl," she whispered. "Smaller. They moved her, not in the wall, somewhere else. I heard her crying through the vents." Rusk straightened like a wire pulled taut. He turned to the megaphone deputy. "We have a second victim likely on property. This is now a rescue priority, full search." The deputy blinked, overwhelmed. "You have enough," Rusk snapped. "Do your job." Danner heard the word second victim and lunged forward, face twisted. "This is insane. You can't just—" A deputy shoved him back hard enough to make him stumble. "Hands behind your back," the deputy barked. Danner sputtered. "I'm the owner." "You're a suspect until we decide you're not," the deputy said. Rhonda made a broken sound and turned away, crying into her hands. Mara stepped closer to Rusk, voice low. "The van," she said. "Back lane. It rocked when the runner went under. That's not coincidence." Rusk's eyes sharpened. "Show me." They moved fast toward the back lane where the black van was still boxed in between bikes and fence. 2 riders stood near it with their hands visible, not touching the handles, just controlling space. A deputy approached cautiously, flashlight aimed low. "Who's inside?" Rusk called. No answer. He nodded to the deputy. "Open it." The deputy hesitated. "We need exigent," Rusk said. "Now." The deputy grabbed the handle and yanked. The van door didn't open. It was locked from inside. Rusk leaned closer, listening. Nothing. Not even breathing. He stepped back and nodded to one of the riders. The rider didn't ask permission. He grabbed a tire iron from his saddlebag and wedged it into the door seam with brutal efficiency, metal flexing metal. The lock snapped. The van door swung open a foot. Cold air spilled out, and with it, the smell of cheap cologne trying to cover sweat and plastic. A shape was inside. Small. Curled. Eli's vision tunneled. Rusk yanked the door wider and his flashlight hit the back compartment. A girl lay on the floor between stacked plastic bins, wrists bound with tape, mouth covered. Her eyes were open but unfocused, glassy like she was drugged. A phone lay beside her, screen dark, a zippered cooler, a roll of tape, a bundle of clean clothes in sizes too small for adults. Rusk's voice went hard and quiet. "We found her." The riders didn't cheer. They didn't shout. Their faces tightened in the kind of rage that stays disciplined only because it has to. Rusk climbed halfway into the van, ripped the tape from the girl's mouth, and she sucked air in a shaking gasp like she'd been underwater. "Hey," he said softer. "You're okay. You're okay. What's your name?" Her lips barely moved. "Mina," she whispered, almost nothing. Eli felt his knees go weak. A medic ran over as soon as the ambulance crew saw movement. "We need a stretcher!" Rusk backed out of the van and turned, scanning the rear of the motel again. "Where's the driver?" a deputy demanded, voice tight. Mara answered without looking away from the building. "Under your feet," she said. At the maintenance window, a rider suddenly lifted his hand. "Movement," he called. Eli snapped his head toward the bushes. The crawlspace window shifted, branches trembling. Something inside scraped closer, fast, and then a hand appeared at the edge of the window frame, fingers white with dirt, pulling hard like someone was hauling themselves out. The branches shook harder, and the hand at the window tightened like a claw. A rider leveled his flashlight into the opening. "Hands up!" he barked. "Slow!" Eli couldn't move. He stared at the dirt-smeared fingers and knew exactly whose they were. The same hands that had held a keycard like it was a weapon. The same hands that had kept calm while a girl begged through drywall. Detective Rusk pushed through the cluster at the van, eyes already on the window. "Nobody touches him unless he comes out," he ordered. "We hold. We cuff clean." The hand paused. Then the cap appeared, sliding into view under the crushed bushes, dark brim, pulled low, like the man was trying to hide even while climbing out. Eli's stomach flipped. "That's him," he said, voice breaking. Mara didn't look at Eli. She kept her gaze on the opening like she could will the man back into the dirt. "I know," she said. The keycard man eased his shoulders up into the night air. Dirt coated his jacket and the side of his face. His eyes flicked once, fast, taking inventory. The blocked lane, the boxed van with its door open, medics kneeling over a small girl, deputies spread thin, bikers locking every angle. His calm didn't vanish, but it changed. It sharpened. He stopped halfway out like he'd decided not to commit to the open. Rusk spoke, low and even. "Come out. Hands where I can see them." The man lifted one hand slowly, showing empty palm. The other stayed near his ribs, hidden by the window frame. "Detective," he said, voice still smooth, like they were meeting at a hardware store. "This is getting out of control. I went under to shut off the water. I heard shouting. I'm trying to help." Eli felt his teeth clench. Help. Like the word itself was a joke. Rusk didn't move closer yet. "Put both hands up." The man did, almost. He raised his second hand, but his fingers were curled around something small, a thin piece of plastic, a key card. Mara's head tilted a fraction, seeing it. "He kept it," she murmured. Rusk's eyes locked on the card. "Drop it." The man smiled slightly, the same thin smile he'd given Eli in the lot. "Why would I have a key card," he said lightly, "if I'm not maintenance?" "You tell me," Rusk replied. The man's gaze slid past Rusk, to the deputy line near the front, to Danner half restrained by a uniform, to the guests watching from doors and railings. He was looking for the human gap, someone eager to believe a simple story. He found it. A young deputy at the edge of the rear lane hesitated, face tight, overwhelmed by the scale of the scene. The keycard man saw that hesitation like a door cracked open. "I can explain everything," the man said, raising his voice slightly. "This is a misunderstanding. Those bikers are holding people here. There are kids, guests. This is dangerous." The deputy's eyes flicked to Mara's riders, to the bikes forming a wall. His jaw worked. Eli felt panic spike, hot and stupid. If the deputy bought it, if anyone bought it, this man would turn the whole scene into mob intimidation and walk away in the confusion. Eli stepped forward without thinking. "Look at his wrist," he shouted. Everything froze for half a second. The keycard man's eyes snapped to Eli, and the calm cracked, just a hair. Rusk's gaze dropped to the man's wrist as the man reflexively tried to turn it inward. Too late. 3 thin lines like claw marks, a small circle under them. Rusk's voice went colder. Out. Now. The keycard man's smile vanished completely. In its place was something flat and predatory, like the mask had simply been removed. He moved, not forward, down. He dropped back into the window in one clean motion, shoulders vanishing into darkness like he'd never been there at all. Branches snapped back into place. Go! Rusk shouted and lunged for the opening. A rider grabbed the window frame and yanked, trying to widen it. Another dropped to a knee, thrusting his light inside. He's retreating. Rusk jammed his arm into the gap, fingers grazing fabric, but the man was already sliding backward through dirt, using the crawl space like a hallway only he understood. Rusk cursed once, short, controlled, then pulled his arm free. Rear stairwell, he snapped. He'll pop up inside. Mara was already moving, sprinting along the fence line toward the rear door. 2 riders peeled off with her, boots pounding gravel. Eli ran after them because the map in his head was screaming the same thing. If the keycard man didn't come back out that window, he'd come up through the patched floor access, the one with the new screws, the one that led right into the motel's guts. They hit the rear stairwell door. It was still locked. A deputy was there now, breathless, trying keys with shaking hands. It's not. Mara shoved her shoulder into the door, felt it resist, then stepped back and pointed once. A rider swung a boot and kicked near the latch with brutal accuracy. The old frame splintered. The door popped inward. Deputies surged inside, Rusk right behind them, gun down but ready, eyes scanning. Eli stopped at the threshold because Rusk had ordered it earlier. Stay on my hip, don't run ahead. And because the stairwell smelled like stale smoke and bleach, and he could already imagine getting cornered in it. Mara didn't go deep either. She stayed at the bottom, holding the door and the space around it, keeping the lane sealed. Eli! Rusk called from inside, voice echoing up the stairwell. Which side? Which corridor? Eli swallowed, forcing his voice steady. Dead-end service corridor, he shouted back. Near room 17. There's a patched panel under the floor. He used it. Boots thundered up the stairs. Then the building answered with its own sound, a hard slam somewhere above, followed by running footsteps on the second-floor walkway. Contact! Someone yelled. Eli's pulse spiked. He craned his neck, listening to the echo. The footsteps cut across the upper level, then stopped abruptly, like someone had ducked into a room. Rusk's voice barked orders up there. Move, hold, clear. Then another door slammed, and the footsteps returned, faster. Mara looked at Eli, eyes sharp. He's trying to disappear into guests, she said. Eli's stomach turned. The motel was full of faces now, doors open, people yelling about water and bikes and cops. Perfect cover. Outside, medics were lifting Mina onto a stretcher, her head lolling as they supported her neck. Talia's ambulance door was closing. Danner was being walked toward a cruiser, still shouting, I didn't know, I didn't know. Rhonda sat on the curb, rocking, hands over her face. The whole place was chaos. Chaos was exactly what the keycard man used. A shout came from the front lot. He's out by the lobby. Eli spun. Through the gap between bikes, he saw a man moving fast but not running, head down, shoulders hunched, jacket half unzipped. Without his cap, without his tool bag, he looked like a stressed guest trying to get away from the noise. For a heartbeat, even Eli's brain tried to accept it. Then the man lifted his head. Eli saw his eyes, the same eyes that had pinned him in the crawl space. Eli shouted, That's him! The man's head snapped toward Eli. Their gazes locked, and the man ran. He cut across the lot toward the office steps, then veered hard for the side corridor that led back inside, moving toward the one place nobody wanted to follow blindly, the motel's sealed service rooms. Deputies yelled, Stop! Sheriff's office! Bikers didn't chase like a mob. They moved like a fence snapping shut. 2 riders stepped into lanes to block exits. Another shifted to cover the side path. The keycard man changed direction again, slipping through a gap between a parked sedan and the soda machine enclosure, then disappearing through a door marked Staff Only. Eli's heart slammed. He's going to the utility rooms, he said, breathless. Mara nodded once like she'd already known. Because that's where the second hole is, she said. Not the crawl space, the other way. Rusk burst out of the lobby, coughing, eyes scanning. He saw Eli pointing and didn't ask questions. "Move," he ordered. Eli ran with Rusk this time, close enough to feel the detective's shoulder brush his as they hit the staff door. Inside, the hallway was narrow and warm, lit by buzzing fluorescents. The smell of detergent gave way fast to something oilier. Machinery, damp, bleach. Rusk led, gun down but ready, deputy behind him with the pry bar, Eli behind them both. A door at the end of the hall swung once, then slammed. Rusk reached it and yanked, locked. He drove his shoulder into it. It held. "Pry!" he snapped. The deputy wedged the bar and leaned. The frame groaned. The latch started to give. A voice on the other side, calm again, called out, "Detective, don't do something you can't undo." Rusk didn't answer. He leaned harder. Wood cracked. The door popped inward. They spilled into a cramped utility space, shelves of cleaning chemicals, a boiler humming behind a metal panel, mop buckets, linen crates. Nothing dramatic, nothing obvious. But Eli's eyes went straight to the far wall. Because the far wall didn't match the rest. Newer paint, cleaner baseboard. A door that looked like it belonged in a bank vault more than a motel. Metal with a heavy padlock, set into the wall behind stacked boxes labeled supplies. "This wasn't here last month," Eli said before he could stop himself. Rusk's head snapped toward the door. He moved boxes aside with one arm, fast, and grabbed the padlock, brand new. He looked at the deputy. "Cut it." The deputy pulled bolt cutters from his belt, department issued, rarely used, and clamped them around the lock. He squeezed. The lock resisted, then snapped with a sharp metallic crack. Rusk yanked the door open. The smell that poured out wasn't bleach. It was plastic and sweat and stale air, like a closed trunk. Inside was a storage room that wasn't storage. Folding tables, stacks of cheap prepaid phones still in their packaging, a box of zip ties, another box of duct tape, a cooler with ice packs, men's gloves, women's clothes in plastic bags with sizes marked, a ledger on a clipboard with dates and room numbers and arrow marks that matched the paper Rusk had taken from the wall compartment. And in the corner, a row of motel towels folded too neatly over something lumpy. Rusk crossed the room and lifted a towel with 2 fingers. Beneath it was a bundle of IDs, driver's licenses, student cards, passports, held together with rubber bands like souvenirs. Eli's stomach lurched. "How many?" he started. Rusk didn't answer. His face had gone still in a way Eli recognized as dangerous control. The deputy whispered, "Jesus." Rusk turned, scanning the room again. "He's been staging," he said. "Transfers, kits, control." Eli's eyes caught something else. A second door, half hidden behind a hanging tarp, its edges sealed with foam tape like someone didn't want sound or air moving through it. Rusk moved to it, slow now, listening. On the other side, the faintest sound, like breathing held too long. Rusk's voice dropped. "If there's anyone alive?" A sudden crash from deeper in the hallway cut him off, metal clanging, then fast footsteps retreating. The keycard man was still in the building, and he'd just realized they'd found his room. Rusk's head snapped toward the utility room entrance. "Stay behind me," he ordered Eli, then raised his radio. "All units, suspect still inside. He's moving fast. We have a secondary sealed door in the utility staging room. Possible third location. Hold every exit." Eli's whole body shook as he stared at the foam-sealed door, hearing that near-silent breath on the other side, not sure if it was real or his brain trying to fill gaps with horror. Rusk placed his palm flat against the door, as if he could steady the world through it. Then, from somewhere in the motel above them, a loudspeaker voice boomed, one of the deputies outside, amplified for the crowd. "Everyone in your rooms, lock your doors, now." And in the utility hallway behind them, a key card beeped, one clean electronic chirp, followed by a door opening softly, like the building itself was letting the keycard man slip through one last time. The keycard beep came again, closer this time. Detective Rusk snapped his head toward the utility hallway, then back to the foam-sealed door. His eyes made the calculation faster than any words. Chase the runner or open the door with the breathing behind it. He chose both. "Eli, behind me. Do not move," he said, and planted himself in the doorway of the staging room so he could see the hall. Then he nodded at the deputy with the pry bar. "You crack that seal. Slow. Quiet. If there's a person, we don't rip them." The deputy slid the flat edge under the foam tape and peeled it back inch by inch. The tape came away with a wet tearing sound, like skin. On the other side of the hall, a door opened softly. Controlled. Not a guest stumbling out. Someone who knew how to move without making noise. Rusk raised his gun but kept it low. "Sheriff's office," he called. Step into the light. A figure appeared in the hall. Not the keycard man at first glance. Different jacket, hood up, shoulders hunched like a scared guest. He kept his head down, hands visible, moving slow as if he didn't want trouble. Eli felt his brain try to accept the image. A harmless guy caught in chaos. Then the man lifted his head. Same eyes. Rusk's voice hardened. "Hands up, all the way up." The keycard man smiled like he'd been waiting for that line. "Detective," he said softly, "you're in a boiler room full of chemicals. Maybe don't point a gun like you're in a movie." Behind Rusk, the deputy whispered, "Seal's off." The foam-taped door shifted a fraction inward, as if someone had leaned against it from inside. Eli's stomach twisted. Rusk didn't look back. He kept his focus on the man in the hall. "Step forward, slowly. Don't make me say it twice." The keycard man took one small step, then stopped, tilting his head like he was listening to something only he could hear. Eli heard it too, a faint, fast tapping from inside the foam-sealed door, like fingertips trying to signal through the barrier. Rusk's jaw tightened. "Open that door," he ordered the deputy. "Now!" The deputy hooked the pry bar and pulled. The door swung inward with a soft sigh. Not a room, a compartment, bare studs lined with foam, the same soundproofing as the wall box, only larger, a small vent pipe, a water bottle taped to the floor, a blanket with dried stains, a strip of duct tape stuck to a stud like someone had peeled it off in anger, and in the corner, crouched tight with knees to chest, was a boy, maybe 10, maybe younger. Hair cut too short like someone had done it in a hurry, eyes wide and wet, reflecting the flashlight like an animal that expected a blow. Eli's throat closed. He couldn't speak. The boy flinched at the doorway, then saw Rusk's badge and froze, trembling. "It's okay," Rusk said instantly, voice changing, softer without losing control. "You're safe. We're getting you out." The keycard man in the hallway watched the reveal without surprise. That was the worst part. He'd known the boy was there. He'd been counting on them choosing wrong. Rusk kept his body between the boy and the hall. "Deputy, get him out. No questions. Straight to EMS." The deputy stepped into the compartment slowly, palms open. "Hey, buddy," he said, voice shaking now. "Come on, we got you." The boy didn't move until the deputy offered his jacket like a blanket. Then, still shaking, he crawled forward. Eli saw bruises on his wrists, tape residue on his mouth, the same pattern. The keycard man exhaled through his nose like the scene bored him. "You're making this bigger than it needs to be," he said. Rusk turned his head just enough to give the man his full attention again. "Bigger than a child in a box?" he replied. The man shrugged one shoulder. "You think you're the first person to find one of these rooms? You think you're going to be the one who stops it?" The words weren't a threat. They were a statement of experience. Eli felt cold spread under his ribs. Rusk's voice went flat. "Hands behind your back." The keycard man smiled again, and Eli understood that smile now. It meant the man had already set something in motion. A radio squawked faintly from somewhere down the hall, different tone than police. A cheap handheld, the keycard man's. 2 quick clicks answered it, like a code. Mara's voice suddenly burst through Rusk's police radio, sharp and urgent. "Detective, heads up. Someone just rolled up front claiming state suit wants custody of evidence and victims." Rusk didn't blink. "Not happening," he said into his radio. "Hold them." Mara. "He's pushing hard." Rusk's eyes stayed on the keycard man. "That your call?" he asked. The man's expression didn't change, but his eyes flickered. Satisfaction, just a flash. "You're surrounded by noise," he said. "Noise makes people do stupid things." The deputy got the boy out of the compartment, wrapped in the jacket, moving him toward the hall. The boy's eyes caught Eli's for a second, pure fear and confusion. Then he vanished past the shelves into the direction of the ambulance. Eli's hands shook at his sides. He couldn't stop it. Rusk shifted his stance half an inch to cover Eli better. "You're done," he told the keycard man. "Whatever you called, whoever you think is coming, you're done." The keycard man tilted his head. "Are you sure?" he asked quietly. Then, In one violent, efficient motion, he reached into his waistband and yanked out a small canister, the same kind he'd thrown earlier, and smashed it against the wall. It wasn't smoke this time, it was liquid. The canister burst and sprayed the hall and the utility doorway with a sharp, sour chemical mist that hit Eli's eyes like needles. "Back!" Rusk roared, grabbing Eli by the hoodie and dragging him deeper into the staging room. Eli coughed, tears instantly flooding his eyes. Everything blurred. The keycard man used the chemical sting as cover exactly like before. He lunged, not away from them, but toward them, closing distance to take away Rusk's gun. Rusk fired once into the floor, warning, not aiming, just to shock the movement, to make the hallway freeze. The crack echoed through the motel's guts. Guests screamed somewhere above. The keycard man didn't flinch. He grabbed the edge of the open staging room door and yanked it toward himself, trying to slam it shut and separate Eli from Rusk. Rusk planted his boot and stopped it half closed. For a split second, the door trembled between them like a tug-of-war rope. Eli's vision swam with tears, but he saw the keycard man's hand shoot through the crack, fast, reaching not for Rusk, for Eli. Fingers clamped around Eli's wrist with bruising force and jerked him toward the hall. Eli's breath vanished. He stumbled forward, half blind, caught on the door edge. Rusk reacted instantly. He grabbed Eli's other arm and yanked back. Eli was pinned between them, one pulling him toward darkness, the other pulling him toward the only safe thing in the building. The keycard man leaned close enough that Eli could smell him, cheap cologne over bleach, calm over rot. "You should have left," the man whispered, and there was no anger in it, only certainty. Rusk's voice went murderous quiet. "Let him go." The keycard man tightened, pulling Eli harder. Something in Eli snapped. Not bravery, not heroism, simple survival. He twisted his wrist the way he'd learned when bigger kids grabbed him in group homes, and he drove his knee up hard into the doorframe for leverage. Pain shot up his leg, but his wrist slipped a fraction. Rusk used that fraction. He surged forward, slammed his shoulder through the gap, and crushed the keycard man's grip off Eli's wrist. Eli fell backward into the staging room, gasping. Rusk went after the man into the hall. It wasn't a clean tackle. It was two bodies colliding in a narrow corridor, boots sliding on chemical slick, shelves rattling as they slammed into them. The keycard man fought like someone who didn't care about witnesses. Elbows, head, hips, everything aimed to create an opening, not win a fair fight. Rusk didn't fight fair either. He fought like a man who just looked into a child's box. A deputy appeared at the far end of the hall, one of Rusk's, charging in. "Detective!" The keycard man's eyes flicked to the deputy, and he made his move, pivoting, slipping past Rusk's grip, throwing his shoulder into the deputy to knock him off balance, then sprinting for the staff door that led back into the open lot. Rusk chased, boots pounding, breath ragged from the chemical sting. Eli stumbled after them, wiping tears, because if he lost sight of Rusk now, he'd be alone again. They burst through the staff door into the lot. Cold air hit Eli's burning eyes like sandpaper. The entire front of the motel had turned into a pressure cooker, deputies shouting orders, guests clustered in doorways filming, ambulances idling with doors open, bikers holding lines with tight faces. And right at the center of it, a man in a suit stood near the deputy line, one hand raised in a calming gesture, the other holding up a badge case. "I'm with the state task force," the suited man was saying. "This evidence is now under my jurisdiction. These victims need to be transferred." Mara stood in front of him like a wall, eyes dead calm. "Not a chance," she said. The suited man's smile was practiced. "Ma'am, step aside." Russ came out hard behind the keycard man and shouted, "That man is not state!" The suited man's head snapped toward Rusk for half a beat, just long enough. The keycard man used that beat. He ran straight at the suited man, not to join him, but to pass him, because he knew people wouldn't tackle someone in a suit with a badge case. He was wrong. Two riders stepped in, not swinging fists, not grabbing wildly, just closing the lane with their bodies the way they'd closed every exit all night. The keycard man tried to cut left. A deputy cut right. For the first time, the keycard man had no clean line. His calm finally broke. He lunged toward the nearest warm body, Eli, because Eli was small, because Eli was leverage. But Mara moved like a trap snapping shut. She intercepted, grabbed the keycard man's wrist, and twisted hard enough that the man's shoulder dipped. He snarled, First real sound of anger, Rusk was on him instantly. He drove the keycard man to the gravel, knee pinning his back, hands wrenching arms behind him. "Cuffs?" Rusk barked. A deputy slapped cuffs on with shaking hands. The keycard man's face pressed into gravel, dirt grinding into his cheek. Even then, he managed a thin smile. He turned his head just enough to look at Eli, and he mouthed something without sound. 3 words. Eli read them anyway. Not over yet. The cuffs clicked twice, and the keycard man went still like the fight had never happened. Detective Rusk kept his knee on the man's back for another full second, eyes scanning the lot for any last move, any last accident disguised as confusion. Then he stood, pulled the man up by the cuff chain, and walked him toward the nearest cruiser without ceremony. The lot held its breath. Mr. Danner tried to talk again, tried to climb back into the world with words, until a deputy shoved him against the office wall and found the second keyring in his pocket. Not the master keys, a separate ring with 2 new unmarked keys that didn't belong to any guest room. Danner's voice broke. Those aren't mine. Somebody, save it, the deputy said and spun him around. The man in the suit still held his badge case up like it could hypnotize everyone into forgetting what they'd just seen. His smile stayed fixed, even as Rusk turned on him. "You said state," Rusk called out. "Name," the suited man lifted his chin. "Special Agent," Rusk didn't let him finish. "Badge number." A fraction of hesitation, too small for most people, too big for Rusk. Mara stepped to the side, not blocking, just clearing a line for everyone's cameras. Guests were recording from doorways, from railings, from behind car hoods. Red and blue strobes made the scene look unreal, but the phones caught everything in clean light. The suited man felt that attention and tried to shift into authority. "Detective, you're obstructing an active task." Rusk moved close enough that the man had to lower his voice. "Real task forces don't show up unannounced and demand custody of victims," he said. "Hands where I can see them." The suited man's smile tightened. "This is a misunderstanding." "Then you won't mind me calling the state liaison and reading your name out loud," Rusk said. The suited man's eyes flicked, one quick dart, toward the keycard man now in the cruiser's shadow. Eli saw it. That flick told him everything. They weren't strangers. They were a chain. Rusk saw it too. "Cuff him," Rusk said, and a deputy didn't argue this time. Metal snapped on. The suited man's calm finally cracked at the edges. "You're making a mistake," he hissed. Rusk leaned closer. "So did you," he replied. "Before we finish this, tell us in the comments where you're watching from, because the next part wasn't sirens and bikes. It was the quiet work that decides whether monsters vanish or go down." EMS took the victims first. Talia was loaded into the ambulance with an oxygen mask, eyes still wide, still tracking every movement like she expected a hand to come out of the dark and pull her back. Mina, smaller and drugged, was strapped gently to a stretcher, her head supported, a medic talking to her in a low voice like a lullaby. The boy from the foam compartment sat wrapped in a deputy's jacket in the second ambulance, staring at the ground like the asphalt might swallow him if he looked up. Eli watched the ambulances close their doors and felt something inside him unclench for the first time all night. Not relief, not yet, but the proof that the screams had led somewhere other than a wall. Rusk didn't let the scene drift. He assigned deputies to every exit, then walked straight into the motel with 2 uniforms and a camera tech who'd arrived looking pale and determined. The Blue Heron was taped off room by room. The utility staging room was sealed and photographed. Every prepaid phone was bagged. Every zip tie box was documented. The ledger pages were placed into evidence sleeves like they were radioactive. Danner kept yelling until he realized nobody was listening. When he finally stopped, the quiet around him made him look smaller. Rhonda sat on the curb by the ice machine, face buried in her hands. When Eli passed her, she looked up, eyes swollen, and whispered, "I'm sorry." Eli didn't answer. He didn't have words for what sorry meant when it came after a door stayed shut. He followed Rusk inside anyway because Rusk had told him to stay close and because Eli's world had always been one step from being thrown out. Tonight, he needed one adult who didn't treat him like trash. Rusk took Eli's statement in the lobby under the buzzing lights, not in a harsh interrogation way, in a clean, precise way. Where were you? What did you hear? What did you see? Which wall? Which seam? Which smell? Which keycard beep? Eli showed him the photos on his cracked phone. Fresh screws, fresh plywood, the patch under the floor. The detective nodded once, each nod like a brick placed into a case that couldn't be waved away later. "You did good," Rusk said, then added immediately, "You did dangerous. Don't confuse the two." Eli's hands shook as the adrenaline drained. "Is he going to get out?" he asked. Rusk looked at him for a long second. "Not tonight," he said. Outside, the bikers held their positions until Rusk told them the suspects were contained and the victims were in transport. They didn't celebrate. They didn't chant. They simply shifted from perimeter to watchful stillness, eyes scanning the crowd for anyone trying to disappear. A tow truck arrived for the black van. A deputy photographed the inside from every angle before it moved. The van's contents, cooler, tape, gloves, burner phones, were boxed and tagged. Mina's hair had stuck to the duct tape. They collected it like it mattered. It did. Just before dawn, more official vehicles arrived, units with different plates, different patches, people who didn't look confused by the word trafficking. They spoke quietly with Rusk, then walked the motel like they were reading an open book. Eli stood by the lobby window and watched as the keycard man was transferred to a different car, hands cuffed, head down, face still blank. The suited fake agent was placed in another, jaw tight, eyes wild now that the badge didn't work. When the cruiser door closed, Eli expected to feel victory. He felt empty instead. Mara came into the lobby then, boots leaving small wet prints on the carpet. She didn't look at the desk. She looked at Eli. "You holding up?" she asked. Eli shrugged because admitting he wasn't would make everything spill out, and he didn't trust the building not to swallow it. Mara nodded once like she understood the shrug perfectly. "Rusk's a good one," she said. "He'll hold the line." Eli stared at the taped-off hallway leading to room 17. "He mouthed something," Eli said. "He looked at me and—" "Not over yet," Mara finished calm. Eli's stomach tightened. "How do you—" Mara's eyes stayed steady. "Because guys like him always need the last word," she said. "It keeps them warm in the dark." Rusk walked in mid-sentence, heard enough to understand, and didn't correct her. He looked at Eli. "Social services are coming," he said. The words hit like a punch. Eli's breath caught. "No," he blurted. I didn't do anything." "I know," Rusk said, firm. "But you're 14. You're not sleeping in a shed behind a motel anymore. Not if I can stop it." Eli's throat tightened. "They'll send me back," he said. "They'll move me and then nobody will—" Rusk cut him off quietly. "Listen to me. You have leverage tonight. Not money, not power, truth. You're a witness and you're a kid who saved lives. That matters." Eli looked away because if he didn't, he was going to cry in the lobby of a motel that had tried to eat him. A woman arrived a few minutes later with a clipboard and tired eyes, flanked by a deputy. She wasn't wearing a uniform. She looked like she'd been pulled out of bed for something that couldn't wait. "Eli Carter?" she asked gently. Eli flinched at hearing his full name. Rusk stepped between them half a step, not blocking, just anchoring. "This is Ms. Delgado," he told Eli. "Emergency placement coordinator." Eli's hands clenched. "Placement where?" "Ms." Delgado opened her mouth. Mara spoke first. "We have a safe house," she said, simple as that. Ms. Delgado blinked. "Excuse me?" Mara didn't move. "Non-profit, licensed staff, beds, food, cameras that actually work. You can run his background. He can stay there while you figure out the paperwork." Ms. Delgado stared like she'd heard 100 promises like that and watched them collapse. "Ma'am, that's not—" Rusk lifted a hand. "It's vetted," he said. "I've worked with them on missing persons. It's clean." Ms. Delgado looked from Rusk to Mara, measuring. Then her eyes landed on Eli, thin, exhausted, filthy from a crawl space, shaking like a wire still buzzing. "Do you feel safe with her?" Ms. Delgado asked. Eli hesitated because safe had been a word adults used right before they did whatever they wanted anyway. Then he remembered Mara stepping in front of him without a speech, remembered 200 bikes closing a circle without touching anyone who didn't deserve it, remembered her saying, "Don't get killed doing the rest." He nodded once. "Yes," he managed. Ms. Delgado exhaled like she'd been holding her own breath all night. "Temporary," she said. "Under supervision. We'll do this by the book." Mara gave a short nod. By the book, she agreed. Outside, the horizon had started to pale. The motel sign buzzed and flickered, as if it was embarrassed to still be lit. The riders began to leave in small groups, not all at once. Perimeter shifted into departure lanes. Engines started, low and controlled. Not a victory roar, just movement. Work done. Rusk walked Eli to the curb. He handed Eli a business card. Real card, clean print. "If anybody tries to move you without telling you why," he said, "you call me. If anybody tries to shut you up, you call me." Eli took it like it was fragile. Rusk looked at him one more time. "You did the right thing," he said, "even when every adult around you tried to make you the problem." Eli swallowed hard. "Are they going to find more?" he asked. Rusk's eyes drifted to the taped-off hallway, to the utility door, to the ledger now locked in an evidence box. "Yes," he said, "and it's going to get ugly for a lot of people." Eli nodded, because ugly was a language he understood. Mara stood beside her bike, helmet in hand. She didn't offer Eli a fantasy. She offered him a place to stand. "You ready?" she asked. Eli looked back at the Blue Heron one last time, the windows, the doors, the walls that had held screams like secrets. Deputies moved through it now like it was just a building, not a beast. Eli exhaled. He stepped toward Mara, took the helmet, and put it on with hands that still wouldn't stop shaking. Behind them, somewhere in the line of cruisers, a door thumped shut. Somebody started an engine, and as the first bikes rolled forward into the thin new daylight, Eli held on, looked straight ahead, and didn't look back.